Today on Doomed! What is happening in Bolivia? Did the people take down Evo Morales? Or was it a coup? If you believe it was a coup, you might have had a dozen or so people online tell you to speak to someone in Bolivia to find out what the real story is. Well, I decided to go out and find someone to talk to about this then. So tonight on Doomed, with me, Matt Binder, your host, we're going to speak with one of the most prominent voices in the opposition. And we will speak to her in just a minute. Let me pull us up first, and while I do that, folks, you could always support this show by going to patreon.com/MattBinder, and you could support the show there. And without any further ado, joining me now on the show is the founder of Standing Rivers, activist, and one of the most prominent people in the Bolivian opposition who wanted Evo Morales to step down, Jeanine Áñez. Jeanine, thank you so much for joining me tonight. And am I saying your name correctly? I know we went over this before the show started.
It's if you want to say it in English, it's fine. If you want to say Janice in Spanish, that's fine too. I'm pretty used to people not...
right. I said it that way before, and I forgot when we went live because that's how I am.
Don't worry. Thank you. It feels so funny to hear you say that one of the most prominent voices. I wish you would know how most politicians in Bolivia would react to you saying that about a young woman.
At least here in the U.S., I've seen your name on CNN multiple times. I've seen your name in BBC. You've gotten around here, at least in the media in the UK and the U.S.
Almost accidentally, though. I think that's one of the problems. There aren't many Bolivians that are easily reached. I guess the language is an issue, first of all. But then we're not like you easily find Brazilians or like Colombians abroad. But Bolivians, I feel like when you find one of us, it's like a lucky charm because there's not many of us out there. Yeah.
Well, last episode of this show, I did have a Chilean journalist who is embedded there right now, reporting on what's going on in Chile. So I guess a Bolivian is rarer, though. It's like a rare Pokemon or something. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, how many Bolivians have you met in your life?
I'm from New York City, so I have met some, but I get what you're saying.
Have you been to the Bolivian Llama Party?
What's that?
Bolivian Llama Party. It's like the one place in New York where they have salteñas. It's a very good.
I haven't. I guess I'll have to put that on my list.
For my fellow Bolivians.
There we go. So let's get right to it. Let's jump right in here. Let's discuss what is going on in Bolivia. And like I said earlier, I have an opinion about what's going on there, and I shared that opinion. In my opinion, what happened in Bolivia is a coup. And, when you say that on Twitter, for example, you get, a dozen or so people at any given moment tweeting at you that you should do your research and you should talk to a real Bolivian living in Bolivia. Now, I've done my research, but also, I do agree, though, that we should hear from people on the ground there. Now, you're in Bolivia now, obviously, right?
Yes. I'm in Santa Cruz. I just arrived today. I was in La Paz until this morning. So it's been very exciting / scary / nerve-breaking times, but still, it's been quite a month for Bolivians, to say the least.
Right, for sure. No, you did. I mean, just this past week, especially. I mean, what just happened there? So let's start at the beginning. Let me ask you, what happened that led to, Evo Morales right now is currently in Mexico, and not in Bolivia. What happened to get us to this point?
Okay, well, that's a very broad answer, but I guess one of the first things I would like to point out is that Bolivia is a very, very complex country, both in terms of the people that live here as well as the ethnicities, because you have 36 indigenous groups recognized by the Constitution, but there are some that are not even recognized by the Constitution. So you have even more indigenous groups than that. And then at the same time, you have mestizos, which are kind of mixed. And I see that you've done your research, you're nodding. And then you also have the thing is, when we had the revolution in 52, a lot of indigenous people transferred to being campesinos because you gave them land to work on. So it kind of took away the indigenous tag off of them and turned them into land workers. So there's kind of a confusion there. But my point being, Bolivians are very complicated, and I can tell you that there's different points at which different parts of society kind of fell out of love with Evo Morales, because when he came into power, and my family was included in this, a lot of people really liked him because he represented exactly what we needed, and I will dare to say what we still need, which is respect and dignity. Dignidad is a big word in Bolivia right now for indigenous groups, because they not only were they not properly recognized by the constitution, but their rights were not being respected, and they were not being treated as equals by most of the society. So that's one of the good things that came with Evo. And out of the many changes we expected with him, such as respect for environmental rights, which in my case in Standing Rivers, we kind of started like an environmental movement. But then the method we used ended up being the most prevailing thing, which is nonviolence. Um, we really hoped and expected. I was really young, but I remember my dad, who's a doctor, being really in love with the idea of Evo being president. And then at different times, different parts of the society fell out of love with him. Indigenous people, I would say, fell out of love with him in 2012 because there's.
We're breaking up a little bit. Uh-oh. I guess the connection there isn't going to be so great. Uh, Let me call you right back. I think we lost. Think we lost her. 1 second.
Hello.
There we go. We lost you for a minute.
Sorry. But yeah, I was saying, I'm sorry, I'm rambling maybe too much. It's been a long day. 2012, the Territorio Indígena y Sigoro Secure, the Tipnis area, indigenous people were protesting because the Morales government opened it for a road to go right through the center of it. And it's an indigenous area that's protected. So in theory, you have to have like a referendum with indigenous people that live in the land before you decide to do any projects within that land. And that didn't happen. So indigenous people protested and they were violently repressed by the government. And while that's not the first time it happens in Bolivia, you didn't expect that from Evo Morales because he's indigenous. So that was a very big turning point for many people that I remember, like in media, that were really in love with his project and then suddenly fell out of love. And then for my generation specifically, I think it was a 21F referendum, el 21 de febrero in 2016, because it was a referendum where he was asking if we wanted to lift the parts of the Constitution that said that you could only be president twice. And most of the vote said that we didn't want to lift that. Like we wanted to have presidents just 2 times in a row, and then you cannot be reelected again. And even though we won in the referendum, the el Tribunal Constitucional, the Constitutional Court, decided to annul it in the next year, in November 2017. So it was like we voted and you still didn't listen to what we said. And then I think the final thing that really pushed things over the edge was the fires crisis that we had in Bolivia when the whole Amazon crisis happened and everyone was talking about the had a big fire crisis in the it started in the Chiquitano forest, but it spread to other parts of Bolivia, like El Pantanal, which is where I grew up when I was little, and Otuquis and Tariquia, which is in the south of Bolivia. And even though different people asked the government to please declare a national disaster so that international help could come in, because myself and my friends in Standing Rivers, we worked really hard to support the firefighters, but we just didn't have the money to give them the equipment they needed to work properly because their like boots were like melting, and some firefighters died of things that could have been easily prevented, like just having the right masks to avoid being intoxicated while working. And I even one of the first firefighter that died, Pablo Suarez, he was the brother of a person in Standing Rivers. So that whole crisis really hit us really bad. And I think that was kind of the last bit that pushed everyone to be really annoyed at him. I think if we hadn't had the fires crisis, or if the government would have responded in a better way, more efficiently, maybe this wouldn't be the scenario right now.
Now this is where we're gonna disagree, and we'll have a little bit of a debate here. Now you mentioned that you mentioned how Evo Morales lost the support of the indigenous people of Bolivia in 2012. But it's if you look at he was elected the next year. I mean, in 2013 he won by the largest amount. We know now that he has run for 4 terms, even though it seems like he won't be serving this one. He's run for 4 terms, and in 2013 he got the most votes of all the terms that he's run for. He received over 3 million votes that election. So I mean, while I'm sure there were people who didn't like him, and I'm sure some of those people very well were indigenous, but it seems like he was a popular he won with more than 61% of the vote that election, the election just prior to this one.
Yeah, and I think this is a point where we're both going to agree, believe it or not, but that's because the Bolivian opposition was and kind of still is very bad. Because we have, like, the problem is Morales kind of became the only leftist option you had left. And then the right wing of Bolivia, most of us don't like them, especially my generation, because in 2014, you not only had many opposition options to Morales, none of them were a credible left. And again, the country needs like progress, and it needs to have really good indigenous rights, women's rights, environmental rights in place. And then the options were, I believe it was Tuto, and then someone from Los Demócratas, I think it was Ruben Costas. And like I myself, I couldn't vote yet, I was too young, but I wouldn't have voted for any of them. So in my case, it makes sense that even though he made all of these mistakes, you would still support him. And then at the same time, even though it wasn't constitutional, because that was his 3rd term, and by then we hadn't even had the referendum, so you're only meant to be president twice. He said that have the constitution changed during his 1st term, then his 1st term didn't count, and that's why this was actually his 2nd term. So there was this like legal debate there that happened, and then he still got reelected. And I mean, dude, it's not like I hate Morales' guts or anything like that. I see the comments on Twitter, and everyone seems to think like I'm a hardcore right wing, but I can tell you right now, like the opposition, even today in Bolivia, is not good at all. Like I understand why everyone is so worried, because I've also seen the tweets that the current president tweeted before, and they're horrible. And like Standing Rivers for sure doesn't support any of that, but we didn't even know who was going to end up being president after this, and none of this was for her to be president. Like it's like you're defending rights that you want to see in your country, and it doesn't matter who the president is, and it doesn't matter if they're left wing or right wing. They should respect the essential human rights.
Right. No, I wasn't planning on jumping in. I'm sorry, we're breaking up a little bit on Skype. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. I wasn't planning on jumping in this quickly to everything there. I wanted to talk a little bit more about how we got here, but being that you mentioned it, let's bring this up. I see what's happened in Bolivia. As someone who is a leftist in the United States, who obviously, I'm an American. I have no ties that I know of in Bolivia. And, but as a leftist, I care about, the working people and the poor all around the world, the oppressed. I want people to be able to, be healthy and take care of themselves and not live in poverty. And what I'm seeing in Bolivia concerns me way more than I think someone like if I was you, for example, and I wanted Morales out of government because like you said, you don't hate him, but you don't think he should have a 4th term. I would prefer Morales, without a doubt, to what I'm seeing right now. If, like you said, you're not a right winger. Because it's very concerning to me.
I completely understand where you're coming from, because that would probably be my position if I was you. Because again, I'm not speaking for all of Standing Rivers here, by the way. I'm speaking as myself and what my political leanings are.
Right.
But I should add, though, that most of the people in Standing Rivers are the sons and daughters of the original people that started the MAS party. So their parents started this party, and their parents were betrayed by the people that jumped in later, such as the vice president. And I think this is another place where we will find that we agree if only you had more information. And it's like Morales is not the only problem. The problem is the people he surrounded himself with. because many things that Morales stood for, again, we support. And let me add here, our constitution is the most beautiful constitution I've ever heard of, because on paper, the fact we have rights for the environment, for Pachamama, for Mother Earth, is something that's never happened in any other constitution. And that's beautiful. Like, that's why we respect our constitution so much, because we know it's such a freaking wonder. And that's why everyone abroad is like, you guys have such amazing laws. Like, why would you be against this guy? The problem is the people enforcing the laws were not really enforcing them. They were going against those laws and getting away with it, because as amazing as the constitution was, Bolivia is a very corrupt country. And the people that were with Morales in power, so again, it's not about him, it's about the whole system, were really corrupted. And that brings, for example, the point, one of the things that bothered my movement and myself the most is that I believe it was 2015, they signed this law where it was legal to go into any protected area for hydrocarbon exploration. Like, starting with the fact that out of our 22 national areas, most of them have indigenous people in them. You can't just open them with one law. You have to have the people living within those national parks, both if they want to have hydrocarbon exploration in them. So again, it's like there was this dichotomy of what Morales stood for and what was actually happening with the policy within the country. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how beautiful his speeches were in the UN, and I applaud most of them because he called a lot of bullshit governments, and they're really bad. Sorry, I don't know if this is censored and I can say bad
No, you can
words.
say whatever you want.
He called on many people on the fake, like, supposedly they were defending the environment, and both of you know, like, your government, my God, we could have a whole other podcast just talking about your government. Regardless of it, whether it's like a leftist, because for me, the left in the US, it's still very right. But anyways, my point being, his speeches and the things that he allegedly stood for internationally were great, but what was happening within the country wasn't. And Morales was not the one doing all of these things, of course, but the fact that he was still in power was allowing to perpetrate this corruption chain within different levels of the government. And that's why, for example, Standing Rivers began as an environmental group that was fighting against the local government in Santa Cruz. I guess you've read by now that Santa Cruz has like a lot of right-wing leaning, because it's a part of the country that is based essentially on money. It's not based on politics or culture. Right. So that's why our movement started attacking Angelica Sosa and Percy, who are the biggest leaders on the municipality here. And then it just escalated. Like, we found that one thing led to another, and we just had to have like national campaigns. But the whole idea at first, why we began, and that's why the name is Standing Rivers, it's for water, because they were polluting our water here in Santa Cruz to make new condominios, like new neighbors that are like close, like high elite neighbors, you know, you only go in if you live there kind of thing. And by doing that, they were polluting the water of the only river that provides water to Santa Cruz. That's why it's Standing Rivers. But yeah.
Let me bring up, actually, because you mentioned first about the Constitution in Bolivia. And, you know, you said how, you know, the biggest problem with Evo Morales is in terms of him changing the law pretty much to, or wanting to have the law changed so he could run for this fourth term. And, you know.
Wait, let me add something there.
Sure.
And that's another reason why we had such a big issue with that. It wasn't just him. It was anyone in power could be reelected indefinitely with that change to the Constitution, which also meant that the local government, Percy and Angelica, that we started fighting so hard, they could also be reelected indefinitely. And that's like a big red light to this is not democracy, when someone can stay in power, especially if they control the electoral tribunal, you know?
Right.
So that's why it and I can tell you this.
Well, isn't the tribunal, though, isn't it made up of elected members, though? Like, they went through no, it's not.
No, it's 7 people, and I believe 2 of them are put by the president himself, and then the other 5 go through like different processes to be selected, but they're not. It's not like you can vote on them. And I can tell you this because, again, some of the sons and daughters of the people that were in the tribunal of Evo, the one that led to this, are in Standing Rivers.
Right, but they're like what is the equivalent of the Supreme Court in the United States, correct?
No, I think the Supreme Court is more about, I mean, I'm not a specialist in U.S. law, but I think that's more about law, and then the electoral tribunal is only about processes to vote, like electing people.
But
I don't think you guys, because it's like a fourth branch. We have four branches. I believe you have three, if I'm correct, because we have the electoral branch, the judicial branch, the legislative branch, and the executive.
Right. Well,
I think you have three.
when I was researching information about the Supreme Tribunal of Justice, what came up for me is that it's the highest court in Bolivia.
Then the electoral branch, because then you have the constitutional court, and then you have the legislative one, and then you have the executive, and they don't have a court. So in theory, it should be four branches. They're each independent, and then the electoral branch has its electoral tribunal that's formed by seven people. In our case, people started quitting, so eventually you had just like four or five, I believe. But they make decisions in everything that has to do with elections. They don't make decisions in terms of law. Like they have no say in like supreme decrees, for example. That's another branch.
Okay, so
Bolivia, we're weird.
okay, so but the process went through it went through the process it was supposed to go through. Like Morales didn't just up and decide that I'm changing the law. This was a process. Like for example, I know it's not the equivalent, but here in the U.S., the Supreme Court, who we also do not elect, they make a ruling on things that the people can vote for. For example, in Bolivia's case, they voted for voted against the referendum to make it so there are no term limits, but this court struck it down. Now, the equivalent could happen here in the United States, where the people can vote for something, and the Supreme Court could determine that, regardless of what the majority vote is, it's against the rules of law.
And yeah, and in our case, there was a loophole because there was a legal, I don't think this was contemplated in the Constitution. So at the end of the day, the electoral branch, which was the one that had to decide whether they allowed Morales to run again or not, they were stuck in a hard place between the referendum that we ourselves made says no, but then the Constitutional Court, which is a completely different branch, and in theory we are independent from them, says yes. So, and there was no clear law as to which of the two had more weight, because in theory, the electoral branch, which I don't think is the case in the US, in theory, for us, the electoral branch is completely independent from the legislative branch. So, and in the end, they decided to go with the Constitutional Court, and they decided to allow Morales to run. But then again, and I guess you can understand this pretty well, regardless of the lawful aspect of it, if you have people vote on something and you still go against it, it's normal that people get pissed off.
Right, but I mean, people can vote for all sorts of horrible things, and it's up to governments to make sure that, right. For example, in the United States, for a very long period of time, people were allowed to not serve black people, and it was the law, and the U.S. government had to step in. It wasn't the will of the people of those states, but the government had to come in and make those decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, I get what you're saying in terms of term limits.
So? Man, we're both, I think, on the left. Are you truly saying that the state has the bigger decision than the people? Shouldn't it be the people? Like for us, if we made our vote clear through a legal, transparent system, which is the referendum, through the ballot, and we told you this is what we wanted, and we didn't even tell you, again, I insist, especially from my generation, it wasn't like, no, Evo, we don't want you to stay forever because we think that we have better candidates in the opposition. No, our opposition mainly sucks, and I've said that to their faces, and I'm saying it here again, even though they're probably going to hear the podcast and they're not going to be happy about it. But if you I have no issues, and this has not been just my position. Standing Rivers has said this publicly today and yesterday. If the mass wants to run again, they should be allowed to run as a party, as long as they bring new leaders. And they have really good ones like Adriana Salvatierra, but they should stay, they should respect the fact that it's not good to have one person only in power for so long. It's never good, especially in countries. And again, this is where I think you cannot compare the US to Bolivia, especially in countries like mine that come from other governments that have already eroded the independence of the different branches. So it's so much easier to be corrupt in Bolivia than it is in other countries. Again, I don't want to compare to the US because you guys are already
Mm,
so complicated. I lived in the US. I know you can be really corrupt. I know you can get away with many things if you have a lot of money. But again, Bolivia is very different. Like even to do like we call it fiscalización in Spanish. I guess it's fiscalization in English. Like even to do control of what your authorities are doing is so much more difficult in Bolivia because people have so many other things to worry about that people in other countries may not have to worry about. That it's just you don't have the time to be thinking about that all the time, you know? So when you already have a weak state because it's been handed to you from right-wing parties that have done whatever the freaking they wanted to do with the country, and on top of that, you have a very strong leadership, but you still have corruption in different levels of the government, and you're not controlling them properly, and you're keeping these elites in power for so long, it's eroding democracy. And I think that's what clearly led to what we have right now.
well, I mean, it's hard for, I think, Western governments to have a voice here because we've seen what happens in democracies all across Europe and the United States. I mean, for example, Angela Merkel of Germany has been the leader of Germany for much longer than Evo Morales has been the president of Bolivia.
Hmm.
And here in the U.S., two, excuse me, of our past three presidents came to the presidency not via the popular vote, meaning they got less than the person, they got less votes than the person who won the, who actually, who lost
Yeah,
who lost the election. So I mean,
yeah. I
it's
was there when Trump got elected, and I couldn't wrap my head about the fact that someone got elected even though he got less votes. And then people started trying to explain to me this whole like electoral college thing, and I was like, "What the frick is this? Like, she had more votes than him. What is happening here? Like, how is this democracy?" So I'm
but
not like,
this is why though I'm looking at what happened on October 20th in your elections, and I'm seeing
mhm.
that Evo Morales won with nearly 3 million votes, and he received 47 more than 47% of the vote. And I get what you're saying about the four. There was a problem with the terms. Some people in Bolivia believe that, and it seems like I can say the majority based on the referendum vote, they want term limits. That's fine. But my what I'm going to bring up here now is why this after the election? Why? I mean, there was there seems to be more of an uproar about the election results than the term limits, being that the term limits were changed quite some time ago, and the election results were just this past October. And Morales, by all accounts, won. I mean, not all accounts, obviously, but by if you're looking at the results, at least he won.
Yeah, but did you see the fact that even the electoral tribunal that was put in place during his government admitted that there was fraud? Like he didn't really win.
Well,
And I
I've seen the the OAS their statement they put out.
Yeah, but then the OAS, dude, both you and I know that Almagro moves to whatever his interests are. Like for Standing Rivers, and you can check our webpage, we even made fun of Almagro several times. Like we never counted on the OAS as an important player for us, at least. But I can tell you that we ourselves, like we did vote control. We organized to do vote control with several other civil society organizations, most of them independent, not most, but all of them independent, because there was like a parallel vote count from the political parties that we didn't want to join because our line has always been we're independent. We're not going to join any political, not even parties, like even institutions like the Civic Committee. I'm sure you read of them. Or you must have, at least if you've been investigating at this. We never wanted to work with them either. In fact, the first thing that Sandy Rivers ever did was to hold a funeral for them because we considered that they didn't represent the citizenry anymore, and they're still very pissed off about that. But we did our parallel vote count, and we ourselves found just in Santa Cruz many cases of like fraud.
What do you
And
mean
then,
by fraud though? What is like what is fraud considered?
do you know how the voting system works in Bolivia?
You can tell me.
Yeah, because it's very different from other countries, and I like it a lot. That's why it was easy to find the fraud, which was afterwards proven by other entities. But we started the protest because we saw the fraud ourselves. So in Bolivia, it's not like you don't vote electronically. You go, you get the ballot, you cast your vote, then you put it on a little box, and at the end of the day, they open the box, they take out every vote, and then they write down who that vote was for on a big sheet of paper. Okay, and then they open it. It was a vote for Evo. They mark Evo. They open it. It was a vote for, I don't know, Patsy. They mark Patsy. It's like one little palito, like a little line for each vote. And then at the end of it, and it's public, so everyone should be able to see it. At the end of it, they count everything, and then they put the total number of votes for each party, and then the total number of votes overall on that table, because sometimes that table should have had 100 people and only 80 of them showed up. So if 80 of them showed up, if you add the numbers of the votes for each party, it should be 80. It shouldn't be any less or more than that, because that's the amount of people that voted. And there were many, many cases where the amount of people that voted for Evo's party was higher than the number of people that voted on that table. And you could easily see that when you took the picture of the paper at the end of the day, because they, before sending the paper to the central tribunal on each state, they had to show it, and you should be able to take pictures. And there were many cases where what showed on the paper was not the same thing that showed on the computer system of the electoral vote. Because if you had the picture of the paper, you should be able to go online to look at this building, that table, and it should show you exactly what you counted when you were there. So there were many of those cases, and then there was also many cases of people that are dead and they showed up as if they showed up to vote, which is also a very thriller episode of our election system. So there was many, many, many instances. And then in my case, for example, I vote in a, I'm not even gonna, why am I telling you the names? But I vote in a specific place. And when I showed up there that day, because we always vote in schools, they changed it, but they didn't tell anyone that they changed it. And they would only tell you that they changed it to another school, but they wouldn't even tell you the address of the other school. And if you went online to see the place where you're supposed to vote, it said the place where there was nothing. And that happened a lot, especially in Santa Cruz and Cochabamba. So a lot of people just didn't vote because when they showed up to vote, that was not the polling station. You had to go somewhere else and you didn't know the address, and then you had to do other stuff. So in the end, you didn't vote. So there was many, many, many cases to see, and it was a frauded election. And even my
I mean, but the sheer amount of like data you'd have to pour through, like you'd have to see, like to really understand the extent of this. I mean, to be honest, like obviously these tallies could be just human error. The easily someone could check mark or write the wrong number in the or write something in the wrong box.
but
I
not
mean,
in such a high amount, my bro. Like honestly,
but
I
have you,
didn't.
but when you say high
I
amount
honestly
in
thought
just
it
Santa
was
Cruz
too.
though, how do you like
It
what is
was
the like give me a number of a high amount? Like I'm trying to
no.
understand.
Standing Rivers was working on this in Santa Cruz, but we were part of a big group that was across the country, and they found many, many, many cases of fraud that were reported on our webpage that you can look at if you go into it. We use Ushahidi, which is a system used in Africa normally for this kind of events, and it was really high and really sustainable. And then at the end of the day, when the results came out, that was another thing, and I'm pretty sure you read about this. They were counting the votes, and then suddenly they stopped the count, and they stopped it for, I believe, 20 hours. And then when the count started again, because people were getting really agitated about it, because we wanted to know who won. Like, it's normal. At the end of the day, you want to know what happened. When they count suddenly happened, like showed up again, the trends of vote are things that normally don't change much. And then you had a very specific trend, and then suddenly it stopped. And then when it came back up, suddenly Morales had the exact amount of votes he needed to win on the first round. So it was a very clear fraud. It was a very embarrassing one. And it was also one of the reasons why he lost so much support, because a lot of groups, like indigenous group, like the Ponchos Rojos and Quechuas and Aymaras, we have these three laws, Amasua, Mayuya, Maquella, which means don't lie, don't steal, don't be flojo. That's like lazy. So being Morales an indigenous president and having lied to his own people, the day that it was confirmed that there was fraud, that was the day that many indigenous groups decided to stop supporting him because it was like a dishonor for them. And that also affected a lot.
No,
Like if he hadn't committed fraud, I think it would have been a very different story. He might still be in power and he might have won on a second round, but
now I've read a study though from the Center for Economic and Policy Research, and they explained why that happened. Basically, and it's been done in Bolivia for previous elections too. There's a quick vote I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you anything new. And that once it gets to a certain point where it becomes clear what how the voting is going, they stop it to actually then get the actual voter totals, and that the amount that Evo got. Once the voting restart, once the counting restarted to get the actual real, no longer quick vote, the actual real count out, it makes sense because obviously you would get vote totals from rural areas, areas populated with indigenous people who would be more likely to support Evo. Their votes would come in, not their votes actually, they've already voted, but the information about how they voted will obviously come in later because they're not in the cities. And I mean that's what happens
No,
that's what
there's
happens in the
a lot,
United States.
there's a lot of, and see, again, Bolivia is not the United States. There's a lot of indigenous people
Oh, you broke up again. Hold on. If I have to
coming
call
up again.
Oh, there you go. You're back. Okay.
Here we are.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, so I was saying Bolivia is not the same as the United States. There's a lot of indigenous groups that live in the cities or close to cities. So most of the votes that were missing were not really rural or in the, like a lot of indigenous votes, because most of us are indigenous. So it's not like indigenous votes were left to the later ending part in Bolivia. It was part from the beginning because again, like I've told you, there's more than 36 indigenous groups there. So our votes were counted within the. I get your point. I get what you're saying about the tip. But then you have to add another layer of information here that you may not know of because you're not in Bolivia, which is that the trap stopped and then it started again. The vice president of the electoral tribunal, who's from the MAS party, who was put there by Evo, who's someone that Masistas themselves respected so much, he came out and said the suspension of the trap was made without my authorization. I wasn't part of that conversation, and it was stopped because the MAS was getting more votes than any other party. I cannot be part of this because ethically I feel bad. And on his resignation letter, at the end, he says like Bolivia comes first, like even before the party. And when he said that, obviously you see people that dislike Evo. You can Google him. His name is Antonio Costas, and he's recently been apprehended. And then on top of that, if you want to Google Maria Eugenia Choque, she herself, the president of the tribunal, who's a Cholita, she herself admitted that there was fraud too. Like this whole fraud allegation doesn't come only from opposition groups or like Standing Rivers grassroots movements. It comes from people within the system itself. And not only on the national level, on the local level too, on the regional level as well. Even like I'm from Sucre, and that's in Chuquisaca. The head of the electoral tribunal in that part of the country also admitted that there was fraud. Like people from the MAS itself admitted there was fraud, and if you had been here, you would have seen how it was so obvious because the numbers they were getting on each table were so low, and it didn't make sense at all to see it compared to the big page results. So that's why I'm saying when the OAS results came out, it's not like the OAS results came out that morning and we were like, oh my God, the OAS is saying there was fraud. Let's go on the streets and cause a riot. No, when the OAS report came out, we were like, we've been saying that for 3 weeks already. Like, you guys are trying to look cool with the people. That's why you're saying we were right, but we knew we were. This is just kind of a confirmation for the international community.
Well, the OAS came out with their statement literally like the next day after the election, which I mean, it seemed, and they didn't have any sort of data or proof to go by at this point.
No, the OAS confirmed the fraud on Sunday, this Sunday.
No, but they put
the
out
day after the elections. They said that they were worried that the trap was suspended, but they didn't say there was fraud.
They put out a statement though the next day, October 21st, that says the OAS expresses its deep concern and surprise at the drastic and hard to explain change in the trend of the preliminary results. I mean,
but that doesn't mean there was
something.
fraud. Like, yeah, but it doesn't mean there. And I mean, again, Bolivia is not like people think abroad. We're not going to protest because the OAS says so, because the OAS has never sided with the Bolivian people. They are pretending to do it right now because I guess it's convenient for Almagro, and I'm thankful that they're saying the truth. But we never liked him much because the OAS, even before Almagro, always failed to believe it. Like Venezuelans, they love the OAS. Almagro is the greatest thing that's ever happened on earth. In our case, and again, that's why check Standing Rivers, we even make fun of him. Like we make memes of him and we put him a mustache and shit. We never really like, Bolivians are not going to go out and protest because the OAS or Almagro says something. Probably many Bolivians don't even know what the OAS means.
Oh,
We
right, right.
know ourselves.
I
Bolivia
don't.
is like a very union organized society. So we saw the fraud before our eyes. That's why the big, and again, one of the things that I wish people would understand, and they would if they were here, is that when the whole protest happened, like the general strike, it happened because it was agreed with the transports union, the I don't know how to say this, the people that sell stuff in markets, not supermarkets, markets, like the
Merchants, okay,
ones,
right.
no, but not merchants, because I feel like that's more like when you sell like, I don't know, computers and TVs. This was more like people that said sell fruits and chicken
Okay.
and vegetables, but not in a supermarket. Like they have their own little space on mercados, we call them. Like it was agreed with them. And it was because everyone was on board that we all decided, okay, we're gonna go and have this like huge general strike and it's gonna start in these places. Because if you don't have them on board, because they're the working class and they're the ones that make money by the day, you can call in a strike because you're going to affect them, and it's
Right.
just not going to.
Right.
So,
But my thing is, I don't think that the people of Bolivia read what the OAS said and then decided to rise up, or that they're being that they're taking information from outside with their knowledge. I'm saying that there are forces that basically help push certain things, and forces outside of Bolivia, for example, do this. Um,
like which forces?
I mean,
So, who?
you have the United States,
Did
um,
you?
the
But
United States government. I mean, it's not completely
care about us, and that's
we
another thing that we understood. Like Evo successfully kicked out the DEA, and then he also kicked out the ambassador. I don't
right,
think there's.
and you know that the DEA in 2008 had plotted to try to frame him or get him involved in some sort of drug scheme to take him down. Like,
Yeah,
this is
of
not
course I know.
right, right. But so this is not.
And that's also one of the reasons he got elected was because the U.S. ambassador, I think it was, said like, if you choose him, we're gonna cut ties with you. And all Bolivians, again, this speaks to how we are. We were like, fuck you. You say we can choose this dude? That's the one we're gonna put in place. So again, so one thing that bothers me about this whole situation, it doesn't bother me because at the end of the day, I understand that a lot of people like you come out of real concern with indigenous people and indigenous rights. And having Bolsonaro next door, of course, you would be cautious about this shit happening in Bolivia, which has a very high indigenous population. But what happened in Bolivia was not led by any external forces. Because even if external forces wanted to have their way in Bolivia, I think we've proven by now, especially after the 80s dictatorship and the Mitila Chungara and how we got rid of them, that Bolivian people are very stubborn. And we're not hardly even like we hardly used to listen to ourselves, much less we're going to listen to
how,
people from the outside world.
how many people would you say are
Wait, let
part
me,
of
let me finish this idea. It's a very colonizing mentality, which is exactly what we fight against. To think that it's impossible for Bolivians to organize this well without an external force playing a game into it.
Oh,
Because
I don't think it's impossible. I mean, I'm seeing it before my eyes that there are hundreds of thousands of people who got out on the streets. But what I'm saying is that there are individuals who are pushed and promoted by various organizations and groups to sort of help mold it and direct it in certain ways. I mean,
that's
you don't think that.
like who? I mean, I know you're saying that about me, and I know you think I'm like a prominent face, but trust me, here in Bolivia, I'm not.
Oh no, I don't
Because
think I don't think I actually don't think that
who,
you're
let's discuss names so we can talk about
okay.
them.
Sure. Now I don't think you are some sort of huge power in Bolivia. What I'm saying is that the media here in the U.S. and it seems like in Europe as well have decided to have you on and to have you discuss. And as you've seen online, you're from people who are talking about you as well. You mentioned it earlier. You yourself have ties with some of these organizations and groups that I feel like no matter even if you say you have these feelings on your own and you're not pushed by anybody, I take that, I believe you. But I mean, there are organizations who have helped back you in terms of just even words, just saying this is this individual, you should listen to this person. And again, I'm not saying in Bolivia, I'm saying in the US and in Europe, to sort of help mold how people outside Bolivia understand what's going on. I mean, look at it this way. The media refuses to call this a coup. Now, maybe we should have this discussion first. Maybe we should have had this discussion even earlier, but let's have this discussion now before we get into the rest. Why do you think this isn't a coup?
Okay. First of all, because I think a lot of people feel like the military just decided to have Evo out of the picture and then kicked him out, and then that was it. When in reality, most people forget that there was 21 days of civil resistance that was mainly nonviolent. I'm not gonna say it was fully nonviolent, but it was mainly nonviolent on our side at least. And what happened eventually was that first the police decided they were not going to repress people. And little by little, like the first city I think was Sucre. And then police in Cochabamba and stuff decided not to shoot at people. And they marched. Some of them marched with us with like white handkerchiefs. Other ones like La Paz took a lot longer to decide to not shoot us. So they never fully marched with us, but they like sided with the people. And then the last day on Sunday, the military decided that they were also not going to shoot at people. And they came out in a press conference saying, now that the police is not obeying the central government's orders to repress, we're also not going to do it, and we suggest that the president resigns. Should it be a coup? As soon as Evo resigned, the military would have had to step in and take control of the country, or some other illegal entity, which could have easily happened. Like one of the things that I didn't want to see was to see like a junta between the civic committees and the military taking over, because that's not what we protested for. We protested because we wanted real democracy, we wanted clean elections, we wanted to have elections again, and we wanted to have the constitution respected because it had been really violated recently during Evo's government. So once he steps out, and then the vice president steps out, and then Adriana Salvatierra quits to being the president of the legislative chamber. Most of us, like, I didn't know about Jeanine before she became president. Like, everyone was like, so who's going to be a president now? Because suddenly everyone quit. And then, according to the constitutional order, she was the one that had to take power. And we wanted that to happen because if you do it according to what the constitution says of who comes next in line, then you're still somewhat obeying by the rules. But then if someone else comes in, like if the Caliman, who was the head of the military, he quit today, I believe, if he would have taken power and then he would have done whatever he wants, then you can be talking about a coup. But in this case, it was like organized civil resistance that escalated to the place where the military decided not to step in. But then no one took the power unconstitutionally, because constitutionally, the next person in line after everyone quit was Jeanine. And then we talk about her now, because I see and I understand that a lot of people see that this position is precedent.
Before we get to her, though, I do want to get to her. Obviously, we're still going to talk a lot about her. But before we get to her, though, I just really need to like really nail this down. What was the moment that caused Evo Morales to resign? There was a specific moment. Something happened. What was that moment?
Yes. People, and you know what? People think, and again, this is people not knowing Bolivia, most people think that it was the military saying, we're not going to shoot at people, we suggest you resign. As a Bolivian, I can tell you that even if Evo didn't have the military, if he had the workers' union and the Ponchos Rojos and the coca growers, he could have stayed in power. Like, because they are a big source of mobilization and power. Let me finish, please. But then, even though the military said they were not supporting him, the workers' union, La Central Obrera Boliviana, which is the oldest union in Bolivia and the most powerful one, and it's really leftist, they too resign and they say, we're not going to support you. Then the Ponchos Rojos, who are like the most radical and violent of groups, they also decide to ally with the opposition and not with the government. And in my analysis as a Bolivian, that's the moment when Evo goes like, okay, I have to get out of here because there's not enough people backing me up to make sure I'm fine. Because the military, at the end of the day, they're very important, of course, but Bolivia works differently. Like if you have the workers' union, you have a lot of power, and he lost them. So I think for me that was a breaking point.
Okay, I'm gonna take what, because I honestly don't know about the timeline of what you just mentioned. So I'm gonna take you for your word there.
That was Sunday.
Okay. But yeah, all that additional stuff you mentioned about the workers' union and the workers. It's important, obviously, to show that he didn't have, if it's true that he didn't have this backing. But again, the definition of a coup is when the military says or steps in and takes power. And that's,
They take power though.
I mean, the photo right after
See,
the video that I saw right after Evo Morales stepped down, is the military standing in the presidential palace doing a grand speech. I mean, I don't know how else you classify that other than the
they
military.
didn't give any grand speeches after he left. They asked him to resign before he left, and then after he resigned, there was no grand speeches from the military. And you may have seen it on a video, but I was in Plaza Murillo in La Paz. Like I was there. If there was a grand speech, I was physically in the place where I would have seen the speech. So and I would agree with you, and I would still be on the street as I was until Jeanine was possessioned, because we were not protesting for a coup. That's not what we wanted.
Well,
We wanted new elections
people
and like
don't.
constitutional order to be respected. But the military suggested that Evo left, but then they didn't like take over the government, which I was worried about. I'll be honest with you, because I thought this could happen, like because we don't know who's going to be the next person in line. Because what I thought was going to happen was Evo was going to resign, then Linera was going to resign, and then Adriana Salvatierra would have stayed as the president of the Senate, and then she would have been the one to go for elections. But she quit too. So it was like, wait, what? Like, who's going to stay in power? And then most of us, we were worried, and we told other people, like, if this becomes, like, if the military steps in or the civic committees, because I'm pretty sure you've read about them,
Right.
if they come in and they, like, we are the new presidents, that's not what we were protesting for. Like, whoever comes next in line should be the one in power, and then that person should go to elections. And if the civic committee wants to participate, they should become a party and they should run. But it shouldn't be the military taking power at all. And that's not what happened. Again, it's a woman. And I know you're not Bolivian, and many people are not Bolivian, but to have a woman, I know she dyes her hair blonde, but still, to have a woman from the lowlands as president, I don't agree with many of the things that she does, but I'm very surprised and happy to see that the military respected her. Because normally you don't have people from the lowlands becoming presidents, and much less women. Like they're very disrespected here.
But this is, listen, I get what you're saying. Well, let's not, let's not get ahead here. Let me first, the idea though that the military would have to take power and that an uprising wouldn't happen first. I mean, we've seen this happen elsewhere. Off the top of my head, it happened in Egypt where there was a mass uprising of people, and the military ended up stepping in after many days of protest. And the military stepped in and made the president of Egypt resign. That is called a coup. It doesn't matter whether...
A coup is when a group that is not constitutionally elected takes power by force. That's the definition.
Right. And a military coup is... In
this case, the military suggested Evo to resign.
But what is a suggestion from the military, though? Let's be honest here. If the military suggests you do something... We know, because we know what it means if you say no, though. We know what it means if you say no.
Yeah, he could have said no. He was the one that chose to resign, because it's contemplated in the Constitution that the military can make suggestions. And I understand, but it wasn't like it was only the military suggesting he quit. Again, that's why I'm saying it was, I don't think Evo is a very strong figure in Bolivia. If only the military would have suggested that he leave, he had the backing of the bases that put him in power, he could have said no and not resigned. But he lost the support. That's why I'm telling you that I believe the point where he decides to resign is when he loses the support of the bases that put him in power, like the COP and the Ponchos Rojos, which are two very emblematic points.
And did he lose them, though, right when the military said something? Did he lose them before? Yeah. So the military says something, and then they automatically say right away, we're not behind you anymore.
No, the COP said it at like noon on Sunday. The Ponchos Rojos said it that very same day, and they had a meeting with the civic committee and they made it public. And then the military said, you have to go. And that's when he decided to quit.
Right. That's what I'm telling you. That's what I'm saying. That's a coup. That's a coup. If he said no to the military, come on, you said you're someone who you don't hate him. You said you liked him for a number of years. Let's be honest here. Like you could like, obviously the uprising helped foment the situation to begin with. That doesn't take away from you guys. You guys were on the ground protesting, but if the moment a leader steps down is when the military gets involved, That's
See,
definition.
and
That's a
that's a very Western analysis because I insist. Should the military suggest Evo to quit, and he still had the support of the workers' unions and the indigenous groups that supported him, he wouldn't have quit. I really think he wouldn't have.
right, but
I really think that that was the thing that made the difference
then
because the
why didn't he
military,
quit when they? Why didn't he quit when they said we don't support you anymore though?
he did. That was Sunday. It was
No,
the same day.
but you said it was
It was like a matter of hours when everyone was quitting. Because I don't know if you saw the timeline. You're so frustrated. I'm sorry. Like, I really wish you could have seen it from my eyes. I'm so sorry you're this
listen.
frustrated. And
Let's
I
put it this
swear
way:
I'm not,
if
but
there's
like,
a mass
let's
uprising in the United States, if there's a mass uprising in the United States to get Donald Trump out of power, if people take to the streets and it's just people take to the streets, if the military then steps in and says to him, "You need to resign," that doesn't matter all the work I or any other activist said on the ground. If the military gets involved and tells the president of the United States to, they suggest, Mr. President, we suggest, Mr. President, that you resign. That's a coup. It doesn't matter where it happens. If the military
again,
gets involved,
that's a very US analysis because I insist it in Bolivia, and you're not, man, if you're not gonna agree with me, it's okay. We can agree to disagree.
of course, that's why I had you on the show.
Like,
Obviously, I know you're
yeah,
not going to agree with me.
I'm insisting. Like, I really think that, and you asked me this, like, what do you think was a decisive point that made Evo decide to leave? I really think it was a moment when he lost the support of the workers' unions and the indigenous people that were supporting him. Because otherwise, I really think he could have stayed in power. And you can look at the timeline. Please be my guest. Google. If you can read in Spanish, it's going to be easier. It was the same day that all of these factors came into place because one of the reasons, again, that the indigenous people that were backing him decided to not back him anymore, it's because he broke one of our principal three commitments, which is don't lie. So when your first indigenous president that you've respected and like supported so much commits such a big lie and it's so public, it's a dishonor for you. That's why they were like, get out, you lied to us. Because you represented us essentially for everyone, not just for Bolivia, for the world. And now here it is in a very clear way. You committed fraud, you lied, you broke one of our three main like commitments, principles. You have to leave. And when he loses all of that support is when he leaves. And like, look, I know and Bolivian people know what we did and we know how it worked. And we know that we don't have the military in power right now, which we're very thankful for because we didn't want like a Sudan situation. And we have a woman that many of us disagree with in many things. Like, for example, we were one of the people yelling at the fact that she was holding a Bible when she's sworn in. And I know you want to go into all of that. We can go
Yes,
into that now.
yes.
But I can tell you, and this is not going to change, and it's not just me, it's most of us Bolivians, it wasn't a coup. And if you think it was, I think we can all agree that if this woman takes us to elections as quickly as possible, and we have democratic elections that are transparent and free and fair, someone else will come into power. She's not going to be the one that stays, and that's her only role. Like, she cannot and she will not touch many things that have to do with indigenous rights or stuff like that. She only has to take us to the elections. That's her role, and that's all she has like power over, and that's it. Because if she tries to touch other stuff, you can be very certain that Standing Rivers is going to be protesting about it, and even whoever comes afterwards, we were just in a meeting right now discussing of all the things that we think, because we think that it's very important to protect indigenous rights, environmental rights, and women's rights, because after what just happened, the right wing in Bolivia is trying to get more emboldened and take advantage of the situation. So we have to make sure that that doesn't happen,
Well, I
because
mean,
these things were very good during Morales' government, so we can back up in that sense. We have to make sure that that's still respected by whoever comes next.
well, I mean, it's already happened. I mean, whether you want to, let's move on from the coup discussion. I think it's a coup. You think it's not a coup. We're not. We'll just agree to disagree, like you said. But Jeanine Áñez, you keep mentioning how she's a woman, and I get it. I'm a guy, so I understand though. Even though I'm a guy, I get it. But this is the equivalent to me, like you keep fawning over the fact that she's a woman. It's the equivalent to me of someone here who says they're a Democrat or on the left saying how, oh man, I wish Sarah Palin was president of the United States. We would have had a woman president. I mean, it's ludicrous though that like it's ludicrous to me that you're sort of saying you're not someone on the right, which I'll believe you, but also you think it's great that she, Áñez, is in power because she's a woman. I mean, it's
you're getting ahead of. I'm not saying I think it's great that it's because she's a woman. I'm saying I think it's great because she was the next one in line constitutionally, and that's what we wanted to make sure, that it was someone who was in line
well, I mean, you
constitutionally.
keep highlighting that she's like
Out of the
the one of I think she's the second Bolivian president who's a woman.
I
Like,
haven't said that once in this conversation, but I can tell you read my tweets because I did tweet that she
yes,
was
you
the
did.
second.
Yes, you
And
did.
I tweeted it because she was the second one, the second female to be president, but both females have been president because of they've been interim presidents. So none of them have been actually elected.
Right.
So that's kind of my way of saying we're not really there yet. Like this happened because it's an accident. Like no woman has actually been chosen.
Right, but
but if you want, let's move on from the fact that she's a woman.
Okay,
Let's
yes,
go on.
let's move on. Okay, let's move on from that. But to me, I mean, it is so concerning. Like, I mean, you keep saying how if the right takes power, the right is taking power. I mean, you have a Christian fundamentalist as the president of Bolivia. This is undeniable. And this is something that this is where I am an expert in. I'm an expert in covering the right wing. Worldwide, I have followed right-wing extremism in the U.S., in Europe, how it's spread in Latin America, in Russia. This is my wheelhouse. You have a Christian fundamentalist as president right now. You mentioned it earlier. She was basically brought in a huge Bible and said how the Bible is back in the palace. Speaking of the Bolivian presidential palace, she has tweeted out that she dreams of a Bolivia free of indigenous satanic rituals. The city is not for the Indians. Send them to the high plains or to the, excuse me if I pronounce this wrong, the Chaco. She tweeted out that she tweeted a picture of indigenous people speaking to the media who supported Evo Morales. She tweeted out that they were fake Indians because they were wearing, and she circled them in the picture, they were wearing modern footwear. Her husband, and this is where it even gets worse because I am familiar with some of these organizations from my covering the right. Her husband is a far right-wing Colombian politician. He has declared himself previously, even in his own Twitter profile, as a Urubista, which is a supporter of the former president who is tied to extremist right-wing death squads. And excuse me if you know this stuff, but some of my listeners probably don't, so I just want to make sure I go through it all.
It's fine.
On top of that, probably the biggest, like I said, I mentioned you as the leader of the opposition, and I mean that as basically, you're a major figure in the media. But obviously on the ground, you're clearly not as powerful as these people. Nowhere near it. But this guy is the central figure in my opinion. And that is, and I'm sure you're familiar with him, Luis Fernando Camacho. And he is bad news. If everyone of those two people I just mentioned previously you think they're far right, this guy takes the cake. This guy is literally what you would consider a neo-Nazi. He is a multimillionaire from a legacy of he's from an oligarchy pretty much. He has been the leader at different points of different fascist groups, Christian fascist organizations. One, for example, the Santa Cruz Youth Union, who there's video. There's video out there of them literally doing the Sikhel. I mean, they're fascists. They look up to Hitler. These are, and this might surprise people, but after World War II, if you're not familiar with the history, a lot of Germans fled to Latin America, and that's why there's a lot of people in Latin America, whether it be Argentina, Bolivia, elsewhere, who have names that you think to yourself, that's weird, that sounds like a German name. So there is, this isn't something that's weird exactly for people who aren't familiar. There are fascist groups in Latin America, in South America. I mean, you could easily roll someone like the president of Brazil, Bolsonaro, into this category. And Bolsonaro's come out and has backed the opposition. Also, who has backed the opposition is the leader of the opposition to Venezuela, who tried to claim himself the real president of Venezuela in the failed coup attempt to oust Maduro. So, I mean, if you are someone who at some point liked Evo Morales and just have a problem with certain things he's done where you think maybe maybe he's let the power go to his head, in your opinion. He shouldn't be elected to a fourth term. Okay. If you are someone on the left, though, or even if you want to describe yourself as a centrist, a center-left person, I don't see how you can think that this is a step in the right direction in any way, shape, or form. To me, this is demonstrably worse than Morales in power.
Thank you. I understand. I worry about the same things that you mentioned. Again, this protest didn't happen because we wanted Jeanine to come into power. Most of us didn't even know of her. I mean, in my case, I didn't. I can tell you that I worry about the same things that you just mentioned, especially when it comes to the civic committee. I can also tell you that it's a different kind of worry when you're here on the ground and you talk to these people and you know all of these people. But at the same time, I can also tell you that Jeanine has one job and one only, and we've all made it very clear for her, which is that she has to call to new elections and she has to make sure that the electoral tribunal, because everyone quit, is filled with people that are transparent and that we know we can trust and that will carry on the elections in a just and fair way. Apart from that, her role is completely, she doesn't have much else to do. One of the things that happened today, and I salute that, is the fact that one of these mega dam projects got canceled, which I think is not one of the things that her government had to do, but I'm glad they did it because it's a big, long fight that Standing Rivers has been in. And Chepetebala, it's called the area. It houses about 17 indigenous groups. But I mean, dude, I'm not gonna lie to you. I worry about the same things that you mentioned. I am indigenous, like I have indigenous, I don't think, is it descent in English? Como que soy descendiente indígena?
Descent,
Quechua?
yeah, it's descent, yep.
Yeah, and like I respect the Wipala because I grew up with it. The three laws that I mentioned, the don't lie, don't steal, don't be like lazy, are things that my mom raised me with because she speaks Quechua. And I think and I insist Standing Rivers is committed to defending indigenous rights and environmental rights, as we did during the fires crisis, which is when we started to gain some international traction, but we had been doing it before that. And we will continue to organize and mobilize defending these rights. But as of now, we wanted, first of all, violence to stop. Because I know that even though it was a mainly nonviolent movement, you and I can both agree, whichever default it is, that people were dying. And it doesn't matter if they were people on the opposition or if it was people that supported Evo, no one should die because we're all Bolivians. So that's one of the main things that we were concerned about, to stop the violent clashes from happening, because it's not okay. And one of the things that we needed for that to happen was for it to be clear of who was in power and that we were going to have new elections, because that was the reason that everyone was fighting about. So I understand your concern. I understand the international left's concern because we are here and we lived them. Like for you guys, it's a concern of what can happen to indigenous people. For us, it's we are here. What can happen to us? Like we are the ones that have been showing up their faces, that have been telling everyone we're going to organize against you if we have to defend this right. So if someone's going to be affected by it, it's the people that are very public about the fact that they're not worried about mobilizing to defend this right. But at the same time, I insist that her role is to call on new elections. That's what she has to do, and to make sure that we have a new tribunal that is fair and that is transparent. More than that, she doesn't have, like, she doesn't even have the time to do it, because according to our constitution, you have to call. Calm down, man.
I think you're giving her way too much leeway here for someone who just like you said was able to, you were able to be you mobilized on the ground, legitimate worries about Evo Morales' reign.
And I'm not saying we're not. I just told you we're going to continue to mobilize.
But I'm not
saying we're not going to do anything about it. What I'm telling you is that we just went through a very violent time in Bolivia. We need violence to stop, no matter where it's coming from, because we don't want more people to die. I believe we've lost more than 10 people in the conflict up until now.
It's a coup. And there's gonna be. I mean, violence happens when there's a coup. That's another reason why it's a coup. I mean, but let's continue with this. I don't think she just rose to power out of the blue, and I think it's sort of, naive to think that. Like, I get that you say this is not the outcome. You didn't want her to become the leader. Fine. Let's take that for as it is. I can't get into your brain and find out what what you hoped the outcome to be is. You never stated publicly other than you wanted Morales to resign. So that I can't speak to. So I will take you for your word there, obviously. But I mean, earlier I mentioned how there are organizations who wanted Morales out of power and wanted results probably like they're seeing right now in Bolivia. And I mean, we'll see the results when it happens. We'll see what happens with the election. We'll see if the U.S. government gets what they want out of it. We'll see if we'll see what happens with another major point of reference to all this is the fight over the lithium and other natural resources in Bolivia, which I'm sure you're well aware of. There's, as you protested against very early on in the summer, the what happened in the Amazon, which again I don't know if how much Morales could possibly be blamed for that. Surely there is some blame to be handed to him, no doubt about it. He is the president of Bolivia, and these fires happened under his watch. But he didn't exactly
during a law that was approved during his government, which is one thing that Standing Rivers is going to keep asking for the Supreme Decree 3993 to be annulled. Let me finish, because that decree is the one that authorized the use of fires in forest areas. So even if Morales is gone and Jeanine is in power, whoever the hell is in power, that law needs to be annulled, because otherwise we're going to keep having those crises if it's legal to use fires in forest areas, you know? So that's another thing that we're going to continue to advocate about. And again, it's one of the things you have to understand. It's not just about Morales. It's like the whole system was very broken. That's why we protested, and we will continue to do so. But the one thing that we right now need is new elections so that violence stops. So that's what Jeanine has to do. We're all hoping that she does it quickly. You're very worried, my friend. I've been here. Like, we've lost the movement. You don't understand how much this means to us.
I get it.
I give you my word, and you can follow Standing Rivers to make sure that we do it, that we will continue to advocate for these rights. But that's why today was such a beautiful day in a way, because it's been such a difficult time lately. But then today, that one project, did you read about that project, the mega dam in the Chapetebala?
I did read about that. I honestly not as familiar with the background of that one, but I take it that this is something that could be a positive. I'll have to look more into that issue. But to blame Morales though for the Amazon fires, I think is wrong, because from my understanding of the history there, the land clearing which involves controlled fires have existed well before Morales came to power.
Yes.
In Bolivia.
It was approved during Ban, I think.
I'm not giving him a pass for continuing these if this is truly something that is bad for the environment and led to these fires. But also the law that he changed, it didn't exactly create the issue. It just basically said, okay, you can also do this in a different area of Bolivia. But the fires happened in the area that Morales's law didn't change. So I mean, it's not like Morales's law is the reason for these fires. I mean, the fires would have happened in Bolivia.
This is when you have to understand Bolivia. The law may not have said that you could do it in that specific area, but when people hear in the news that you can use fires in forest lands, whether it's in your area or not doesn't really matter, my friend, because you've just been given a green light by the central government. So people started doing it. And that's because Bolivia is not like the US. It's not like you guys that you say something has to happen here and then it happens there, and then you have a system that's very corrupt. Your police is not the best one in the world, but you still have some system that makes sure that law happens. Like if a state says this can happen here, like I don't know what states, like if Connecticut says we can do this, Alabama knows that it's not them that can do it. They know it's Connecticut. Here, things are so different and so broken, and like institutionally, they fail, that communication has a whole different system of working. And then things like the fires crisis happened. And regardless of whether the fires happened in the land where the law was allowed or not, the law should just not exist. You shouldn't be able to use, like, and as environmentalists, I believe we're going to agree here, you shouldn't be able to use fires in forest areas, because forests have lives, not just the animals, the trees themselves. So you shouldn't, and much less for agro-cattle industry, when we already have a big one, which is the one that sustains, for example, the civic committee that you're so mad about. So we have every right to protest about that, and we will continue to do it, whether it's a very leftist government that comes into place or a very right-wing government, because we have, like, Standing Rivers has things that we are going to protest about. And like, my friend, you probably understand this better than I do. We cannot control everything that happens in Bolivia. I'm speaking here on behalf of Standing Rivers. We're doing what we can with the limited resources that we have, with the capabilities that we have, because right now we're all very tired after what's happened, because after the fires crisis, the whole election thing happened, and it was all at the same time. So it's like we haven't had a break in months. Some of us haven't showed up to work in a long time. But we're going to do our best. We want to make sure that we keep everyone on check, because that's one thing that's missing not only in Bolivia, I dare to say in all of Latin America. People really fall in love with specific leaders, and then they let them get away with stuff. And
Now,
that's what creates this kind of really bad scenarios,
now,
that you just let them get away because you focus on the persona instead of looking at the system, which causes a type of crisis that we have in Bolivia right now. And that's one thing that Standing Rivers really fights against. We want to have people not look up at personas, but look at the actual policies and how they affect our lives, because then you cannot get away with stuff. And again,
well,
there's a reason why we are not the civic committee. Standing Rivers could easily be part of that, and we're not. There's a reason why we're not with the Democrat Party. Here it's the Democrats, but it's a right wing. For you guys, the Democrats are the left, right? So Jeanine's party is the Democrats. That's what they're calling Bolivia. We're not part of that party either. We're not even part of Mesa's party, which is the closest to the left that we have right now, besides the MAS. But we're going to keep on doing what we think we can do. And honestly, I am very hopeful. It's been a horrible time. I've been with the firefighters. We've been with many people that have suffered. We ourselves have suffered. It was a very scary situation in La Paz. I don't wish that upon anyone. It felt horrible.
I think you're sort of giving away. I think but what really bothers me about this though is that, you know, in terms of sort of the culpability from the opposition who claims that they're not part of the right, is that there is culpability there to what
the opposition doesn't claim they're not part of the Standing Rivers does.
Okay.
The civic committee is not going to.
But there is okay.
They're not right-wing.
But no matter what Standing Rivers and what your personal, what you hope to get out of it, there's culpability here though. Like for example, if somehow we overthrew Obama in the United States, and I use these examples to the U.S. because this is a show based in the U.S. The audience is mostly the U.S. So while it's not completely analogous, I'm using this so people can understand.
Okay.
It would be like if the left here overthrew Obama because we didn't like drone strikes and his treatment of whistleblowers. All fair. I was a major voice in the opposition from my time on other shows in terms of the things that Obama did that were horrendous. But it'd be the equivalent of us overthrowing Obama and Trump coming to power. It's we moved in the wrong direction, and there would be culpability. There would be blood on our hands for what happened, because it doesn't matter that's not the outcome we wanted. We helped the outcome become. Like, we were part of the reason this happened. Like, like, you guys have a literal fascist movement in the most powerful positions of government right now, or around the most powerful position of government right now. It's like, no matter what happened before, like, this should be something that, to me, this isn't the time to rest. This is worse than Morales. This is the time where you need to dispose of this person. This is.
Who says we're resting though?
What's that?
Who says we're resting?
I mean, but you said this is just the. But you just said that this is like the time to stand back and just see after you just got rid of Morales. Like, to me,
no,
this is.
I didn't say it was a time to stand back. I said it was a time to stop violence. And stopping violence means working on conciliation and working on making sure that the voices that are now very worried that they're going to be oppressed, like the indigenous groups and women's groups, are given the space that they need. Therefore, we're organizing to support that. I feel like you're
right, but do you see though, like, that's a very privileged position to take though. Like if I, as a white person, told a black American in this country to chill on talking about the police, we just had a major reform, even though they're still doing stuff, you got to chill. I think you're classifying all of the Bolivian opposition as if they were just one thing, and you're projecting a lot of fears that you have about the civic committee, for example, on Standing Rivers. Because I'm not telling people to chill.
one of the things that we said with Standing Rivers is to not, like, people are going to think that Morales is gone, oh, things are fine.
Okay, so
And it's
not
not.
you think
You
the
have to
violence should stop. Let me
mobilize.
reword myself. You're correct. You think the violence should stop. Okay, but that's the equivalent
Yeah.
to me. I mean, as a white person, if I told a black person to chill about his civil rights being violated
Again, we're
and he
not
shouldn't,
telling
okay,
you.
not to
We're
be
saying
not to be
violence
violent,
stops.
not to start
Therefore,
riots,
we should
not to
continue
not to
organizing and
attack people, not
mobilizing
to attack
without
property.
violence, which is what Standing Rivers has always been about, mobilize without violence. But as of now, for them to mobilize without violence, we need to make sure that people are not attacking them anymore. So we're not telling anyone to chill.
Okay,
Standing
I
Rivers
think
is
I keep saying that word and you're focusing on it. So let me make sure I don't say chill anymore. I think it's a
okay.
privileged position to say stop the violence when a person who is openly hostile to the indigenous people of Bolivia is in power. Like, how do you tell the indigenous people of Bolivia to not be violent? I mean, if I was an indigenous person, I would find
We're not saying the
myself,
indigenous
like, there's
people should
violence
not
going on
be
against the indigenous people right now by this person
We're
being in
not,
power.
again, this is you not understanding Bolivia. Bolivian, like indigenous people in Bolivia, most of them are nonviolent by their culture and their conception of the world, beginning by the Tibnis people. And then the people that are really protesting right now and they're being violent, it's not all of them indigenous people either. You have to look at, like, you have to be here to understand, man. Like, a lot of the people that are mobilizing right now are more like coca growers or people that live in rural areas that are not necessarily indigenous. And again, one thing that I've said several times is if they want to protest for Morales to come back, they have every right to, just as we have been protesting because we wanted them to leave. But we have to, like, one thing that's very important for us right now is that people learn to listen to each other because we can't keep killing ourselves over this or over anything. No one's life is so worthless that it's worth less than what they're fighting about, you know? I don't know if that came out well in English.
No,
My point being,
I get what you're
like
saying, but there's
one of the things that we're focused right now is one, stopping violence by making sure that parts listen to themselves instead of just attacking themselves. Another thing that we're going to work on is continue the work that we've done for the Chiquitano forest areas and demand that that law that we discussed, Supreme Decree is annulled. You're so frustrated. I'm
because
so sorry.
because
Feel like if
it's
we
a
got three
very
hours
because
talking, I could have you hear you
because
completely answer.
I don't think you can say that it's time for the violence to stop. If anything, I mean, I would understand if
It's
it
time for
became
violence to increase.
more. I mean, obviously, no one wants violence, but you can't request the violence to stop when someone who is openly hostile to an entire group of people is now the president of Bolivia. Now, you can say Morales did bad things to certain individuals, but I don't think anyone would argue that he oppressed an entire group of people based on their race or their background. What we're seeing now is someone in power, openly backed by hostile Christian fascist groups, uh, and you're saying that the indigenous people should not be violent. I don't see how
I'm
that's
not,
possible.
again, you're putting words in my mouth. I'm not saying indigenous people should not be violent.
I'm
I'm
not okay.
saying
I don't see
no
how.
one should be violent. And please listen to me. I've spent the last 3 years of my life convincing the people you're criticizing right now to not be violent against indigenous people. Because Standing Rivers began as a nonviolent movement to give people who didn't like Morales an alternative on how to protest without being violent to the police or to indigenous people or to Morales supporters. All we've done is talk about nonviolence. And we will continue to do so. And if you think it's not the time, okay, then we're going to have to agree to disagree because for me, violence, there's never a good time for violence. Whether it's Morales, whether it's Jeanine, whether it's a civic committee, or whoever it is, it's never time for violence, especially in a country like mine where holding people accountable for violence on the lawful spectrum is not going to happen. Because you can get away with murder in Bolivia because of how fucked up our judicial system is. So we're
Well,
never going
you
to
get rid of
call for violence.
you could get away with murder here too. It's not. It's
I know,
that's not
I
any
know,
country
but
specific.
you don't need to compare. Like, I'm trying to explain to you, and please stop comparing us to the US, that it's a very different, especially if you are like a Cholita in Bolivia and you get raped or something. It's very unlikely that even if you try to report it, no one's going to believe you.
Well,
That
that's
and I know
yes, that's obviously
and
a
again,
problem.
you can say
Yes.
it's the same case in the US as well, but here there's this extra layer of like judgment upon race and class. Like you guys
I don't know if
you should
that's
know about colonization.
I mean, we had slavery in this country. We had slavery in this country.
Again, I'm not comparing. I'm not saying it's worse here than or worse in the US. I'm just saying it's something that you have to
No,
bear in
I'm
mind.
not saying
That's
it's
why
comparing.
violence
I'm saying I
never-
understand. I mean,
and like
one of the biggest problems in this country in terms of rape is that Native American women in the United States are often raped without being able to tell anybody. They're just raped without
I know.
any justice.
And I'm not saying that's not true, but what I'm telling you is, first of all, please look, there is not one tweet, one post on Facebook, one nothing in Sending Rivers that says, Indigenous people, please don't be violent.
well,
We always
the
say
fact that
to
you want everyone to stop being
everyone
violent,
has
though.
to be, we say to everyone that everyone has to be nonviolent. And just as much as we've done this work with the people that you're criticizing right now, we're going to continue doing it with everyone. And I add to that what I told you at the beginning of this part of the conversation. Most of Indigenous people are not violent by nature in Bolivia, according to how they perceive the world, especially the ones in the like middle lands. They don't consider themselves to be violent, and that's why sometimes people can abuse them and get away with it because they're not going to respond. And that I've seen that happen a lot with indigenous people losing their lands because they're not willing to be violent. So again, we're never going to call for violence. We're always going to call for resistance, organized nonviolent resistance. It's what we've been doing for the past few years. You keep mentioning the civic committee and right-wing groups in Bolivia. Sending Rivers began protesting them specifically. I told you at the beginning of the conversation that the first protest we have was against the civic committee, and you can ask them about it. We brought them caskets, we brought them roses, and we told them, you don't represent the people anymore, so we have to bury you.
Let's move on here, because there's one more important thing I want to get to before, because we've gone long, and I'm happy we've gone long. Thank you for staying with me and taking the time. But there's a whole nother aspect we still have to talk about that I've teased multiple times earlier. But I feel like the coup and the actual political situation there that's directly involved with the people on the there. I felt that was more important to talk to up front. But let's get to these groups that and you know who I'm talking about, because you know I'm referencing some groups that you have connections to as well. And there is without a doubt people in the United States who want to see Evo Morales overthrown. They wanted to see, this is the same people who want to see Maduro taken out of power. And one of these groups that you have direct ties to is the Human Rights Foundation. And this is, by all accounts, and this isn't a group that I just discovered. I'm very aware of their founder, Thor Alverson, who has a long history of connections to the right. And I don't know how. I know you have very direct connections to this group. Can you tell me exactly how you're involved with the Human Rights Foundation?
I work as the Freedom Fellowship Manager at HRF. Yes, I do.
Now,
that's it's everywhere. You can see that anywhere you want to.
Right. This isn't hidden, right? Thor Halverson, by the way, he's a guy who, my earliest understanding of him, when I first learned about him many years ago, this is probably, the beginning of this decade, even before that, probably in 2009. This guy was a former right-wing activist who was putting out films funded by conservative billionaires, literally people who in this country have funded some of the worst people in this country. Other things he's done is this Oslo Freedom Foundation, I believe it's called. It's going to be Freedom Forum, and it has connections to a number of different Islamophobic figures, specifically a guy by the name of Frank Gaffney, who is probably one of the most anti-Muslim people in the country, if not the world. This guy and Thor has gone on this guy's program to talk with him, and I have no problem with people going on shows to discuss and to disagree and to debate, but by all accounts, this appearance on this guy's podcast or show or whatever it was not to have a debate and to sort of hit him back on him being an Islamophobe. It was just a friendly conversation with a guy who supports the Oslo Freedom Forum. And other things that Thor is involved with, He is friends and has business relations with Peter Thiel, a major Trump backer who has funded different lawsuits to take down press organizations
okay.
in the United States. Thor also has strong business ties with Eric Prince. Now, this guy's the former CEO of Blackwater, still the CEO of whatever the hell Blackwater's called nowadays. This is a paramilitary. This is a private military contractor group, and they have been found guilty in U.S. courts of literal murder of Iraqis when they were hired to go over there, obviously, during the Iraq War. And Eric Prince, by the way, is also family with Betsy DeVos, who happens to be Trump's Secretary of Education. On top of that, Thor's groups are also funded by the Donors Capital Fund. The Donors Capital Fund has been called, by the way, the dark money ATM of the conservative movement in the United States, because the Donors Capital Fund is basically the way the Koch brothers and the DeVoses secretly get their money to fund, different right-wing groups. Thor obviously has supported the coup attempt in Venezuela. He has backed the guy who claims to be the president of Venezuela when he's not. He supports what's going on in, which makes me question what's happening in Hong Kong.
Okay, can we talk about Bolivia? I feel like you're going on a whole rant on who you think Thor is, and
Well, this is all.
but
Well, I think you need to know who the founder of one of the organizations who backs
I
the
work
coup.
for the Human Rights Foundation. I know
Right,
my bosses.
right,
Your point being,
right. I mean, as someone on the left, how do you work with this organization who I mean, clearly has in some way helped your, at least, maybe not. I mean, it's influenced you in some way. I mean, you work for them.
so do you have any other jobs apart from this one?
Oh, I'm a.
Would I be right to think wherever you work, you do exactly what your boss is telling you? But anyways, the
Well,
Human Rights Foundation.
I wouldn't work for an organization that backs coups and an organization that is funded by right-wing billionaires and millionaires. I just wouldn't, and I've never have. In fact, I can tell you for a fact that I never have worked for, and I never would apply to work for somewhere that has connections with any of these individuals.
Okay. Well, I'm very proud to see that you have a very good work ethic. I can tell you in my case that all the work that what? You don't want that compliment?
No, I mean, I think it's important. I mean, it clearly has some sort of influence and you've been out. Like I said, this isn't a secret. You've been out.
Not a secret. I've attended to several Also Freedom
You've
forums.
spoken
I
as,
work at the Human
right?
Rights Foundation. Yeah, I've spoken on the stage of the last well, not the last one, because there's been some after that, but I spoke on the stage on the Also Freedom Forum in May this year in Norway. I think it was May 25th, because it was Mother's Day in Bolivia. But yeah, the Human Rights Foundation works on promoting freedom and democracy, where it's most needed, like in closed societies. We can agree to disagree if you don't think that the closed societies that are considered closed are actually that by yourself. But I can tell you that.
I mean, it's really easy for someone to say. It's really easy for someone on the left and the right to say, we don't agree with what the Chinese government is doing to the Muslim people in China. That's something that's obviously a terrible human rights violation. But yeah. I mean, there's different reasons that both of those sides say those things. For example, the right uses China as a boogeyman. They basically use China to basically portray this sort of nationalism, saying that if we don't do this here, then terrible China is going to go ahead and do it. They don't really actually care about the rights of the Chinese people who are being oppressed.
Yeah, but I mean, mind you, this is probably the point where we can go on forever. I do the work that I do for Bolivia, for people of Bolivia. Standing Rivers began on its, like, I'm one of the co-founders. There are many people in Standing Rivers that don't work for the Human Rights Foundation. I'm actually the only one that does. And Standing Rivers makes decision based, as many grassroots movement does, in like horizontal group vote, which is what we've always done. And if you think my intentions are in some way or another influenced or directed by these people, I cannot ask you to step into my brain and see. I can tell you that what we've done for Bolivia, we've done it ourselves. I can tell you that if HRF was interested in specific governments, they could probably do many other things than have a grassroots movement in Bolivia.
Well, I
But
mean, but we've discussed this. These grassroots movements can easily sprout up, but then be basically co-opted, or if not co-opted, outright directly. People who are influenced by these outside organizations can come to power and become major voices.
to your argument that this is directed by outside forces, which by the analysis you're making immediately makes people here incapable of making their own decisions. I can tell you, and this is going to be my statement on this because I really don't want to go long on this debate because it's going to be, we're not going to agree. I can tell that you're
Well,
not going
obviously,
to.
you work for them, but I mean,
But
it would be wrong of me as a
let me
journalist
finish
to,
the
to not
statement.
bring this up. I mean, I think you agree with
Let me
that.
finish the statement. Let me finish it. Don't get so worked up. We do things in standing rivers because of what we see is necessary in Bolivia. I think both you and I agree that environmental rights, indigenous rights, and women's rights need to be respected in Bolivia as in many other countries, but we focus on the work that we do here. The work that we do as standing rivers is completely independent from the Human Rights Foundation. The Human Rights Foundation has its own job to do, which I, as a human rights defender, I'm very happy that I get to work in that organization. They have no power over what Standing Rivers does. They're probably not even aware of all the things that we've done because it's two very different things. If you don't want to believe me, you don't have to. I'm telling you the
But
truth, and this is
why
the
do
truth
they
of
have so many
my.
ties to different far right wing organizations and figures and
Oh, Lord,
extremists?
friend, you're calling me to talk about Bolivia, and now you're talking about something completely foreign and that has very little connection to what's
Oh,
happening here.
come on. We've been I think see this is what makes me think there is something here. Because we've been having and I've purposely had this I purposely have not interrupted because I think it is important to hear from you. And I mean obviously I think it's important to hear from you. I've invited you on this show. But I mean it's we've went back and forth. We've really gone deep into this stuff and we've
Hmm.
both listened to each other. And now, weirdly, we get to this the outside forces who I think are somewhat, in
Because
some
we've
way,
been on this
involved.
subject already, and I've told you that you may think, and I see that you truly believe that there are outside forces directing all of this. But no
Not.
foreign NGO could have convinced so many people to go out on the street and protest in Bolivia.
Yes.
What has
Listen,
happened is
it's not about convincing
we're gonna
everybody.
have to disagree then.
It's
We're
not,
gonna have to
but it's not
disagree.
about, but it's not about convincing everybody. All you need to do, is get a few loud voices out there to spread the message that this is something unjust and we can't take this. And then people will hear this, not knowing where these voices came from, what's backing these voices,
Because
why these specific
you
voices.
really think Bolivian people are that easily manipulated and
But
stupid? That's very
it's not about Bolivian. But it's not about Bolivian people. This is human nature. This is all over the world. We've seen this. You keep.
okay. Then we will have to agree to disagree because I don't think human nature is like that. I think things are a little bit more complex, especially in my country.
Oh,
And
there's been
we're
studies
gonna have
that show
to
just
agree to disagree.
how easily human nature can be used to manipulate people, to make people think that they're part of something that's organic.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to convince you about human nature. If that's what you think, fine. I respect what you think. And I respect it so much that I'm not going to be aggressive about trying to change your
Oh,
mind.
right,
I can tell you my truth. I
but
can tell you the
I'm not here to
truth.
change your mind. I'm here for you to tell me what you believe, and for me to tell you what I believe,
And
and for
I'm
us
telling you, I'm
for us to defend our positions. And it's just weird to me that when we get to, you're obviously someone very passionate about taking down Morales, and you clearly, as a Bolivian, care about this stuff. I'm not, at no way,
not
shape, or
just about
form,
taking the
but
Morales. There's many things that need to be defended in this country that go beyond him.
okay, but in no way, shape, or form am I attacking you or putting you down for you caring about your country.
Like, no.
There's no way I can absolutely do that. Clearly, you care about your country. What you think should happen to your country is where we could disagree, but clearly you do this because you care about your country. The Republicans in this country think they care about, do what they do because they care about the country. But what I'm telling you is that it's weird to me that when we get to these groups, this is the one part of our conversation where you just want to sort of shut down, and you don't want to sort of even rebut it. Why is this group, why is this foundation, as someone who works for them, and I get it if it was completely different. I get if you worked for some, I don't know, some right-wing music label or something. a music label that's just founded by a right winger. I get that's completely different. Fine. But this is an organization that deals with the very thing Standing Rivers does. So you can see why there would be some sort of...
Not the exact same things, because the Human Rights Foundation is more about freedom of speech and human rights, basically. And Standing Rivers is very focused on environmental rights, indigenous rights, women's rights, and freedom of speech. So it's like you're not going to see many campaigns from the Human Rights Foundation specifically about environmental rights. They do human rights.
Well, Human Rights Foundation helped. I mean, helped push the idea that Morales was not the only one that Bolsonaro was not the only one to blame for the Amazon, and ceded that Morales shared equal blame. Which, if you think Morales had blame for the Amazon fires, I get it. I probably think he had some. I could be convinced, and I probably don't need to be convinced. Morales had something to do with some of the fires that happened in the Amazon. But to think he's as culpable as Bolsonaro, who literally just is selling off the Amazon, I mean, that's just insane. It's not even close. And the Human Rights Foundation pushed the idea that put Bolsonaro aside.
It's okay. I'm letting you go on for long, so you see that I respect you. And it's okay if you think that Bolsonaro.
I'm not a fan of debates where people cut each other off. If I felt like you were just going somewhere where it needed to be cut off, that's when I intercede. But I let you say what you have to say, because otherwise I can't properly give you the other side if I don't hear your full conversation. So I just don't see how the Human Rights Foundation doesn't come into this conversation. I mean, there's a lot of things connected here to me that are suspicious.
You're still going off on this, dude.
Because there's suspicious.
I'm not shutting up. Okay, first of all, I work for the Human Rights Foundation. That's no secret. Again, I repeat, Standing Rivers was formed by Bolivian people. It's directed and carried on by Bolivian people. Human Rights Foundation has absolutely no...
But who founded Standing Rivers? Who founded Standing Rivers?
Federico Morón, who's an environmental activist from Santa Cruz. Nagai Mirtemau, que también, he's also from Santa Cruz. He was more of a political than environmental activist. Also, like, his father is a journalist, so he's more in like that area of activism. And then me. It was a form.
And you, right? Correct. I'm sorry, you broke up for a second. The Skype connection's sort of going out. But you're one of the founders of Standing River, correct?
Yeah, and when I was one of the founders of Standing Rivers, I didn't have a full contract with HRF. I was working as an intern, part-time, by long distance. But I mean, so it wasn't like there was a big conspiration behind it. And again, you seem to be made up your mind that there's a complete direct line, verticality from there. It's not the case. That's what I can tell you. And I don't think it's...
But this is where, and I have said this to every sort of...
the battery is at 2%. I'm just going to let you know.
Okay, I've had...
You can call again and I'll pick up from my phone.
Okay.
But just
if we need to do that, definitely. And I appreciate, again, you taking the time here. I've said to, and again, I've had people on the right wing come on this show. Again, I'm a leftist. I've had all sorts of people I disagree with on the show, and there's always people I disagree with who refuse to come on, and there's people who do. And I always say, I completely am thankful for someone who wants to have this debate, because otherwise we're never gonna get anywhere. So again, This is not a direct attack on you. You being on this show already makes me tip my hat to you. But I mean, there's so many different layers here that make me question why you, at least in the U.S. media and the European media, which is where Human Rights Foundation would have the most power to decide, hey, I want to push this individual to be the voice here. For example, you have gone, you have a Wikipedia page, and your Wikipedia page has completely been created and edited by a single user before you rose to prominence in the media here with the ousting of Evo. And the one group who felt that you were an individual worthy of a Wikipedia page was a right-wing PR firm called Matador PR, who created your Wikipedia page and updated it throughout these past months when you were, again, just an unknown. Why is that? Why did this right-wing firm decide you were notable enough and no one else, and that they were going to go out of their way to consistently get the facts as they wanted, as a right-wing PR firm would want to present? why they did that for you. I really want to, I'm trying to understand that. And I want you to, and I have you on the show here to explain to people. So, if there's a conspiracy here, we could shut that down.
Okay, so your point is that this is all a whole right-wing conspiracy to place me as a leader in Bolivia, but from the outside of Bolivia to make sure that we take out Evo Morales? That's what
No,
you're trying
because I think obviously you're just if whatever the Human Rights Foundation wants and whatever any other of these groups want, and really it comes down to what the U.S. government wants. Really, what it comes down to what the U.S. government wants. And these groups, obviously, you can see with Human Rights Foundation's ties to the Trump administration specifically. I just laid them out. Very close ties. This isn't something that's completely unfounded. I mean, Eric Prince, Peter Thiel, Betsy DeVos. This is not, we're not in conspiracy theory territory here. This is the Human Rights Foundation's right-wing founder having direct ties to the right-wing administration of the United States. If they wanted to help push in the media in the United States or in Europe that, hey, this is what's going on in Bolivia, it's not a coup, then...
My battery is 0%. I'm just like...
All right, let me call you back now then. You said you would let me call you back, so let's do this. Let me call you back.
Okay.
All right, folks, we're gonna keep doing this because I think this is important. And again, some people are upset that I'm letting her go on for a little bit too long, and I don't like debates where it's just people cutting each other off, because then you are gonna come across as not wanting the person to defend themselves. And I don't want any accusations that I didn't let her get her point across or her side across. I want this to be on the merits of the content. Hey. Again, I respect the fact that you're back. Again, some people might have used that as a way to just end the conversation. So clearly you're ready to talk, So again, I'm not. So what, is it that far-fetched that you, as someone who, all right, let's not even say that you're being used in any certain way, that in terms of them changing your political opinion or having you push what they want. Let's not even go there, because that's okay. You've laid out your side of the story for the first hour of this conversation, and it makes some of what you say makes sense. But here you are, someone who has these feelings. You don't think Evo Morales should remain in power. You want to
want to remain in power for so long.
Right. You don't want anyone remaining in power for that long. But Evo Morales is the president, so he's the one in power. Now, these right-wing groups see you working for them, and they go, hey, this person can be used as a voice in the U.S. media or media in Europe to be used to push our position. We're not changing her opinions. We're not changing her opinions, but we can help push her so that we can make sure she's one of the voices being heard.
Okay. Now, you can check Twitter, and you can do it because it's public. And you'll realize that most, if not all, of the interviews that I've gotten, because I've gotten some of them through Instagram, have been of journalists that have tweeted at me, and they've said, we want to talk to you because sadly, and I said sadly because I really wish it wasn't the case, my account is one of the very few accounts on social media that reports on what's happening in Bolivia constantly in English. So most of the interviews, including the ones that you've mentioned, CNN, BBC, etc., happen because people reach out to me on Twitter and said, we want to talk to you. Can we do it? I replied, yes, let's talk on DMs. And then we set up the interviews. Should we want to have HRF push me or something, don't you think the first place I would have been in your idea of what's happening would have been something like Fox News or something like that, which I've never done? Like the only people, the media that I've talked to, and you've mentioned them, are CNN and BBC. Both of them reach out to me through Twitter, which is a public social media that the HRF is not paying for. That's something that's for free and that anyone can have. So I think I get why you would be suspicious of that. But if you look at the actual facts of how I arrived to international media, it happened through Twitter. And again, I invite you to look at the tweets and replies that I've gotten in the past few days, because I replied to some of them and said, yes, you can talk to me on Twitter, blah, blah, blah. And then once I talked to someone in BBC, they passed my name on to someone else, and then they emailed and called and said, can we talk to you as well, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, they did. But then this is it's clearly not a systematic, you're thinking like a campaign to have Janice on international media all the time, because it's been very sporadic. It hasn't been And even because of the fact that I'm on the ground, so sometimes I can't take calls. I don't look at my phone. Sometimes I don't have phone service. Phone service and Wi-Fi are not the best in Bolivia. So I understand that you would be suspicious, but I ask you to please look at the facts, and I invite you again to check Twitter and stuff. When I've been on international media, it has been because either they reach out to me on Twitter, or because Bolivians that know me and live abroad said this girl can explain to you what's happening, and they've given my name. And that's happened mainly for Argentinian media that I've spoken of, that you probably haven't even heard of, that I've spoken of on the last month or so.
Right.
But
Now, I'm not, clearly you're on this show, so I'm not saying that Human Rights Foundation is making sure. Right, you're on there. I tweeted at you, I emailed you, you reached out to me.
Question. You're
I'm not at all.
I'm explaining your question.
Right, right. And I'm backing this part of what you're saying up, because I want people to understand that I don't think you're some sort of completely created by the Human Rights Foundation. I mean, there's other things I'm going to bring up here that I think, first of all, for example, why you specifically?
So it's getting late, and I have to go.
Really quick though, because there's just one or two more important things to bring up. We can do this really fast. Just talking minutes here. I think the most important thing is that you're someone who went to school here in the U.S.
I got scholarship studying Kent State University. Yes,
right.
With scholarships. I'd like to point that out because it would be impossible for my family or for me to pay for education abroad.
Right. The Harvard Kennedy School. It's it's
the Harvard Kennedy. I never ever even set a foot on Harvard. If you look that it closed, it doesn't happen now, but it's an online course.
Okay, was it online? So, but you went to school at Kent State, you said, right?
Yeah, which is extremely left wing, may I add.
Right. Well, I mean,
think anyone who's been to Kent State University.
Right, but one of the most prominent right wing activists right now in the U.S. went to Kent State as well. She's known as the Kent State Gun Girl. So I mean, it's not
the right wing activists, but if you knew Bolivians, you would know that they don't consider us right wing here.
Right. And I appreciate you going on all sorts of shows.
Please don't tell me you think I'm like Tommy Lauren.
I mean, I don't think you're like Tommy Lauren. I think, because I don't think that's the equivalent here. I think you're not as I think you have right-wing leanings, maybe not a right-winger fully, but I think you might be what we call here as a neocon or maybe even a neoliberal type. I mean, I don't think you're as left as you think you are, based on these organizations. I mean,
it's funny to hear coming from a leftist in the U.S., but thank you.
I mean, it is what it is.
Let's do a question.
Okay. I mean, it's impossible to say this, and I'm not saying obviously this is before you were born, so you have no. But it's impossible to not mention how your great grandfather is a former president of Bolivia who took power via a coup. I mean, again.
In 1899.
Right. I mean, right, but.
Have ancestors that had slaves.
I can tell you I didn't, because my ancestors were all immigrants. I have no ancestors here who.
Probably people that are really amazing people have ancestors who were slave owners, but that doesn't mean that they support slavery. And in my case, like Daza is a very Baca, especially Baca and Daza, both are really common last names. But like, come on, dude. Like, if you want to bring that up, I never even met my grandfather.
I mean, obviously he was alive in yeah, right. Well, which is why I said you can't control this. There's nothing to. But I mean, this is a guy who. I mean, clearly there's a reason why you're a name who's being, you clearly come from an area of privilege. I mean, this is a guy who fled to France with the Bolivian treasury.
Let me finish. You're making an assumption, because what actually happened is my parents are both doctors. They had me on their first year of university. My mom's dad, and I can't believe I'm getting this personal in an interview, but anyways, everyone's talking about my personal life on Twitter anyways.
Well, this is the perfect forum to shut it down if there's I'm not. Yeah. Again, this is an attack. This is No, I know. This is news, and we need to cover it. And I appreciate you taking the time here. And so let's get the record straight.
The background again. My grandfather was killed because he was exposing corruption cases during the 80s dictatorships. That's why I never got to meet my Daza grandfather, which is the one that everyone's accusing the Daza family to be like extremely privileged. Not the case. I was born to two parents that were in their first year of university. When I was born, we didn't even have a crib. I was sleeping on a chair. We've had many different stances with my parents when I was little, and they were really young because they were 21 when they had me, that we didn't even have food. And it's not like any of this is relevant, but I didn't come from privilege, because in Bolivia doctors don't really make that much money. It's not like the US. And my parents became doctors officially when I was like 10. So for the first years of my life, they were university students, and we were making do with whatever money we had. We didn't even have potable water. Um, so it's not like, and you can, I mean, if you were in Bolivia, you would know people in the civic committee, for example. I can tell you that they come from very privileged families. They've always had a lot of money. They've always had a lot of political power in Santa Cruz, and which is not necessarily something negative. I think some of the people there are really good people. Some may not be, but I respect everyone regardless, because nonviolence. And in my case, my family, like my parents, because of what happened with my grandpa, how he got murdered during, because I think everyone knows that the 80s dictatorship in Bolivia and the US was behind that one, the Plan Condor. They were really bad, and there was very little space for dissent, which is why the left was so precious in Bolivia, because it was so hard for them to exist during all of those years. In my case, I don't come from a space of privilege, and I can say that for everyone in Sending Rivers. That's why we're kind of the odd kids on the block, because everyone's like very aligned, and then there's us like protesting about this stuff that most people in Santa Cruz do like.
I mean, but
yeah.
you do see how you have a very unique background. Like, how many people can say their great grandfather came to power in Bolivia through a coup? I think we could probably say, what, one person? I mean, who, two, maybe three? I mean, the number of people is very small number of people who.
Hey, come on, man. If that's where this conversation is going to go, and I say this really respectfully, you can't blame me for a coup that happened.
Oh no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Listen, do not take this that way, because that is just ridiculous. That's not what
And
I'm.
why are you bringing it up? It's
Because
almost 1 a.m. and I'm here trying to make my point. Okay, there
because
was a coup.
I think it's right.
Grandpa, it's really curious. I have no power over that.
I
I
mean,
mean, to apologize
it's
for him. I don't know. Like, what's your point bringing this up?
because everyone's background plays into who they are in some way. I mean, there's a reason why you are, you are who you are, basically. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not saying you are not responsible for the coup, but this he was your great grandfather was backed by the financial moneyed interest in Bolivia, who tend to be, have right wing leanings at the very least. In every case, I mean, this is just the facts. If you have
Does
money,
that then I should shut up and not say anything about it?
no. But it helps people
What's your point?
understand where your background's from. How your grandparents came to believe the things they believed, how your parents came to believe the things they believed, and how
I
you
didn't
came
have
to.
a grandfather. He was murdered
You don't have to
by
meet. You don't have to
right
meet them though. You don't
here.
have to meet them though. I mean, my
You
grandfather. My grandfather fought the Nazis in World War II, and unfortunately, I only met him once when I was a newborn baby. But I can tell
I'm
you that
sorry.
knowing who he is helped turn me into someone who, in every step, in every way, shape, and form, I will fight fascism, no matter what. I mean, it's just
Yeah, and
it has
that's
turned
also
me into
why
who I am today. I mean, it's
it's also why I'm an activist, because my mom didn't have a dad because freaking right wing dictators in the 80s in Bolivia killed him.
okay. I mean, it's something that needed to be brought up, and I'm glad that you answered it, and I appreciate you taking the time here. I mean, I hope you think there was something worth coming on this show for, because I think it's an important conversation. I mean, I see you taking a lot of a lot of replies to you on Twitter from people who feel the same way I do, and I think if you wanted to be open about it, this is the perfect forum to do so. And I appreciate you coming on this show and speaking to it. I mean, I hope you think it was important to speak to these things, because I hope you
Yeah,
don't.
that's something I said on Twitter. Like, I really think Facebook and Twitter discussions are often not productive. Like, people just get stuck on what they want to believe, and sometimes they even insult. So that's why when you asked, I was like, yeah, this is probably a good point. I mean, as long as things are respectful, I'm very willing to explain things, because I know and I truly believe this. Like, a lot of the people that are currently hating on people like me in the opposition in Bolivia are worried about the same things that I specifically and Sending Rivers worry about, which is indigenous rights and women's rights. They're just like, they don't have the full scope of what's happening. And maybe some people won't even have it after watching this, but I wanted to be clear that
I stand for nonviolence. Standing River stands for nonviolence and for women's rights. And as a woman who's trying to have a space in a very machista country and create a bigger debate and create consensus and conciliation, it's important for me to talk to people, even if sometimes I think they won't agree with me. Because at the end of the day, I really do believe we worry about the same things. We just have different information.
Now we didn't get into a lot. There's even more I could bring up, but I know it's late. You spent 2 hours with me. I really appreciate that. Again, but there's some. I'm just going to quickly mention them. We don't have to get into it. There's a report that came out that basically says, and there was leaked audio that showed this, that the commander in chief of Bolivia's armed forces basically attended a school in the U.S. that's run by the U.S. military. Was formerly called the School of Americas. And I just bring right, and I mean it's just another. What was that? I'm sorry.
Was that Caliman?
I'm not sure. Are you talking about the school? Oh, the commander in chief. Williams, I think, his name.
Because there was one, but he quit yesterday, and we have a new one. So I'm trying to figure out if you're talking about the old one or the new one.
It was, I believe, it was Williams or something like that. That's what it was, like his middle name or something like that.
Remember, Caliman is the last name of the one that we had, the one that asked Evo, that suggested that he would resign.
Okay, but a major figure in the Bolivian armed forces, whether he's still there or not, but he was there when Evo resigned.
Okay, then it's Caliman.
Right. So I mean, these are just more reasons why I think there's out. And again, I'm not saying that there aren't reasons to protest in Bolivia. Clearly there are, and you've laid them out, and I appreciate you doing that. But I mean, there are also, at the very least, if to give you all the credit in the world, at the very least, there are groups, some that you are involved with. You may not, you may not have anything to do with it, but you are involved with it. And the U.S. government and various other organizations who have a stake in this and have taken advantage of a real movement in Bolivia that wanted their rights as Bolivians, their voices as Bolivians heard, to say, Evo Morales, you should not have a fourth term. And I don't know how much they were involved with how it came about. They don't need to be involved in the beginning of it. They don't need to be involved in who are, they don't need to even be involved in the creation of this movement. They've taken advantage of it, and we see who the winner is by who is sitting in the presidential palace right now. A far-right Christian fundamentalist backed by neo-Nazis is currently running the government of Bolivia. And whatever the outcome, you hope the outcome to be, this is by far the worst possible thing that could have happened. The worst. There is no other outcome that I see that could have been worse than this. And that's sort of what I want to end on this. If there's anything that you take out of my opinions on this, it's not that we should fight over whether or not this is a grassroots movement, not whether we should argue over whether this was a coup or not. This is all stuff that, yes, will matter for the history books, but for caring about the indigenous and the poorest of Bolivia right now, it is the current government of Bolivia who is exactly what I just said they are. And I'm really, we'll have to see what happens, but
I agree. And that's why one of the things that I was surprised but happy to see is that the huipala remains as a national emblem. I'm guessing emblem is the word. The huipala is a flag of indigenous people that has a lot of different colors, and it's in like squares, and it goes diagonally. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yes, and I meant to bring that up. That's the flag that was burned by the police. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So that flag, for example, represents some of the indigenous groups, but not all of them. And because of how much it caused a big debate, and because it's not what you would expect from a right-wing group, I was very surprised when the president said that we are going to keep it as a national emblem, and she didn't take it out. Instead, she added another flag of indigenous groups that were not represented by that one. So now we have three flags, essentially. We have the right yellow and red, beautiful one you see behind me. We have the Wipala, that if you were like an Avenger, you could have just taken it out because, they hate indigenous groups. But they kept it and they added another indigenous flag, which for me is like, okay, so step one, we're going in a somewhat steady, like safer direction than I thought this would go. And I understand how worried you are. I'm not. I worry about different things that you worry because of the different information I have being here. But I thank you for worrying so much about my country because most people don't even know where it is. And I can see that you've read about it, which is also very different from most people who just think that it's very simple and it's not a simple country here. And I can tell you that at least, I mean, I cannot speak for most of the Bolivian opposition because there's a reason I'm not working with them. And it probably has a lot to do with the fact that we're all very young in Sunny Rivers and we don't take anyone telling us what to do. But I can tell you that you are very worried, but the ones that can actually take action on the ground here is us. And I can tell you that we will. And I invite you to follow Sunny
Oh,
Rivers.
I hope you'll come on again when we see what happens when things get further down the line. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like whether you want to come to terms with it or not, you helped play a part in what's going on there. And again, if playing the part of ousting Morales, you view that as a good thing. Obviously, you wanted Morales or anyone again to not have 4 terms or unlimited terms. I get that. But you also played a part in the rise of a Christian fundamentalist fascist group running the country, or having seats next to the Christian fundamentalist right
I
winger.
could tell you that you played a part in Trump being in power because you may not have been working for the right wing, but you're part of the left that couldn't get their shit together, and eventually it led to this.
I mean, if we ousted,
Is that fair?
if we,
I wouldn't personally blame you for it because I understand how difficult these things are. I can tell you that what Stunning Rivers has done is freaking outstanding because talking about nonviolence in such a violent country and being able to do it successfully and without losing many people on the process is a big thing. So I'm very proud of the work that Stunning Rivers has done.
Listen, I said I'm sure you want. Let's put it this way. I've said it before. If we ousted Obama and Trump came to power thanks to a Tea Party revolution, then I would feel responsible. But in terms of Trump coming to power, the left actually in this country, and this is completely different, obviously, but just to go back on what you said, the left in this country backed a candidate who, by all understanding of the situation in 2016, would have defeated Trump. It was the centrists and the moderates of the Democratic Party who propped up the candidate who couldn't defeat Trump. And that's why we are where we are today. But again, this is a different
against them, which is what you're telling me. It's okay that you're worried about this, but you could have done it better so that this doesn't happen.
I mean, what ended up happening here, though, at the end of the day, though, was an election. And whether we agree with the results or not, an election is why Trump is president. The woman who is currently the president of Bolivia was just declared herself president.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was an unfair election because I remember seeing that in the end, the Democrat candidate had more votes.
Right. It's true, Trump. But in this country, though, the law is, and we know this going into the election, so this isn't a surprise. We want to change it, and we're trying to go through the process to change it. But in this country, when it comes to the presidential vote, we go by the electoral college, which means people vote, and then each state, all 50 states, they tally up their votes, and whoever wins that state gets the electoral votes. For example, I don't remember how many.
Yeah, there's different seats for each.
So for example, if you are a candidate who gets,
is puzzling. How is it possible that someone else had higher numbers and still they're not the ones that win?
Right. I mean, and I agree. And on that front, I mean, to me, it's crazy that someone could just stand up in Parliament and say, "I'm the president of Bolivia," and there they are. I mean, it's crazy to me too. I mean, we could agree.
It wasn't necessarily. The thing is, Evo quit, but the reason that Jeanine became president is because Evo left the country, not because he quit. Because if you quit, then the Congress has to have a session and they have to decide who's going to be the next president. But if you abandon, then because of it's an emergency, because you abandoned, you left the country headless, essentially, whoever comes next in succession is the person that has to become president. And in this case, sadly for people like you, it was Jeanine.
Well, I would say
for
sadly,
us,
if
it
you
was-
are if your position is what you say it is, I would say even worse. It's sadly for people like you who've had your grassroots movement co-opted by the far right.
It's not co-opted, my friend. We're not gonna do anything they tell us. We do whatever we want. But
I mean, they're the ones in
it's
power. I mean, we're gonna go back and forth, obviously, and
let's
it's
try
just
to wrap this up because it's almost
right.
1
Right.
a.m.
Let's wrap this up. You know,
But
I hope you
my
come back on as we see how this plays out. If again, if I've said this 100 times, but I hope to see Standing Rivers and yourself, especially out there, on all the media that you're able to get, and hopefully backed by the Human Rights Foundation and other groups. I hope to see you, because this to me is where people who claim to care about human rights should be speaking up. A Christian fundamentalist group is running a country. I am really concerned, and I hope that the media gives even more attention to this than they ever did before, because this is something that's horrendous. Janice,
See, that's your statement. On my end, I really hope that this interim president takes us to the transparent elections we need. And once we get to that point and we see what happens, because again, Standing Rivers doesn't support any specific political parties, I hope that we can continue doing our work freely and maybe even better than we did before.
hey, I hope if a right wing militia took control of this country, they would have fair elections and keep their word. But I got to tell you, I highly doubt that. I mean, we've already seen in this country right wing organizations and groups do everything impossible to hold on to power, including kicking people who are more likely to vote Democrat off the voter rolls so they can't vote. So I mean, it's
what happened in our elections here. We just come from
I hope
abroad.
I hope so. Janice, did I say it right this time? Janice.
Yes.
Janice Vidaza, where could people find you online so they could follow your looking at the your future?
They can follow me on Twitter, but more importantly, look for Rios de Pie or Standing Rivers.
Well, I'm going to be following you because I really do. I'm going to hold you to your word that you're going to speak out against Áñez, because this is something that I think you should, and I hope to see it, because I haven't seen it yet. I've seen the tweet that said you're in tears because she came into power as the second woman to be the president, but I wouldn't be happy.
I wasn't in tears because she was a woman that became president. I was in tears because for the last 3 days, I was so scared in the past because things were getting so violent, and I knew that we needed someone to officially become president, and I was scared that that was going to be the army or something that was not on the constitutional order. So when we finally saw that happening, which we thought was going to be so difficult, I was like, finally, some stability after all that we've been through.
All right, Janice, we'll see. I mean, this is not something where I'm like, this is not. I hope everything I brought up, I hope I'm wrong. I hope no matter her horrible Christian fundamentalist right-wing views are, I hope there's actually a real fair election in Bolivia, and you come back on this show and tell me how you got what you wanted in the end. There's a legitimate president of Bolivia who is not, who's going to do 1 term, 2 terms max, and is going to listen to the people and run in the interests of Bolivia's oppressed, they're poor, and they're indigenous. And if that's the case, I'm happy for you to come back on this show and say, see, it worked out and I told you so. And I'll be happy to say, you know what, Janice, you were right. But until then, we just gotta, this is where we gotta leave it.
Again, I'm not telling you it will work out because I cannot speak about things I cannot control. I did tell you, however, that Standing Rivers is going to continue working on the things that we've been working on and that I told you that we will work on, and that you can hold me accountable for.
Okay, sounds good. Janice, I really appreciate you taking the time tonight, really. Again, and have a good night. Take care.
Thank you. You too. Talk soon.
Take care. All right. Here comes Skype closing down. Boop, boop. Oh, my God. That was, I sang, oh, my God, because of how long it took. Wasn't expecting to, let me put the volume up here. Wasn't expecting to go 2 hours. Listen, you're not going to get answers from her. And if we were in person, anyone who you disagree with, if you're going to just be an a-hole over the internet here, obviously. If this was in person, there's different, you could shut someone down and they walk off or whatever and they look bad. But here, they could just shut off Skype. I don't want that to happen. I'm not saying she was going to do that. I'm saying anyone I disagree with. When I have a right winger on this show, I'm not going to just say, fuck you, shut the hell up. I'm going to, when I had Caitlin Bennett, or the Kent State gun girl, the Kent State gun girl, Caitlin Bennett on this show, or when I had Kevin Martin from Turning Point USA on this show, who's a Trump supporter, I am not going to do that because they could just shut it down, and there goes that. And there goes every point I want to bring up and hold them account to and get an answer out of them for. And I think Jeanine had good answers to some things, and I think the part where she sort of stood back on it is the part where I kept it to where I kept it because I didn't think we were going to get to that point if I brought it up right away. Two, it is the part where I was most concerned not getting an answer out of her because clearly she's going to know Bolivia. It's her country. She's going to know the referendum. She's going to know the laws that were changed. She's going to have legitimate gripes with Morales. There's no doubt about it. I was expecting her to have that. I didn't bring things to sort of say, I know more about Bolivia than you. That's not the case here. But what I do know from my expertise is how the U.S. works and how right-wing groups work. And this is where she couldn't answer to how I would have liked. And the concern, that's what I'm concerned. And that's where I think we are correct. Those on the left who believe that that this is a coup and the U.S. has backed this in some way. And that there are organizations who wanted to see this happen and did what they could to make this happen. That's why I think we are in the right to believe that. How far Jeanine is into this, I don't know, and that's where I wasn't going to speculate. I had her here, so I couldn't really do anything but take her for her word and use the information that we had, which I did use, to defend my position. Other than that, I appreciate her coming on, and I hope she'll do it again when the situation in Bolivia progresses. Whether it progresses or regresses, we'll see, as it moves forward, I guess, in time. And to that's really the most I can put out there to this. If you're disappointed in how I handled this, I'm sorry. I handled it in a way where I could actually get her on this show and discuss this with her and confront her with this stuff. And to that, I don't know what else to say. You could support this show by going to patreon.com/MattBinder. I hope you agree that there's no other show that would have done this or had the ability to do this. I believe I've been able to put across that I'm someone who is a leftist, a socialist, who is willing to have these discussions and fight back on them, but I'm also not going to just interrupt you and shut you down. I'm going to hear what you have to say and then take every single thing you say and hit you back on it. And I don't know how else to do it. That to me is the way you do it. Patreon.com/MattBinder. I want to do more stuff like this. I'm not an expert in South American politics. Of the countries in South America I know most about, it's probably Brazil, Venezuela, and Peru. Half my family, based on relationship, basically marriage, is Peruvian. So I know about Peru and its politics and its history, but I also read about this stuff and I research this stuff, as it's out there. And I don't just take, one sort of viewpoint. I understand that there are biases on every side, but the left bias, in my opinion, more than often turns out to be right. Right as in correct, not right as in on the right. Patreon.com/MattBinder. You can also support the show by subscribing to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/MattBinder. Follow me on Twitter @MattBinder. That's the show. Support the show by going to, you can also drop a super chat, and that's a way to give a one-off donation, and I'll read your super chat right away. Listen, we went 2.5 hours almost on the free half. I don't know how much of a patron-only half I'll do for this show, but I'll do it. Maybe we'll go 30 minutes just so I could get some semblance of what's going on. I'm not going to take calls for this one. Maybe we'll do a separate call show just for this over the weekend. I'll let you guys know. But otherwise, let's go to the Patreon only part. If you're watching live, you could stick around. You don't have to be a patron, but I hope you'll support the show anyway. Oh, I will read the Patreons because without them, I couldn't do this show or any of the shows I do. So hold on one second. Let me go to Patreon. Let me give these people the credit that they deserve because these are the reason I'm able to do this show. So again, if you enjoyed it, become a patron. Patreon.com/MattBinder. And you should thank these people too because, again, I am funded by them. That's all I speak to. Nobody but myself and the people who fund me. And when I speak to them, I mean, I take their guest recommendations and I will look into them and I'll have people on the show. For example, the Chile show was a recommendation from the guest was a recommendation from a listener, Renee. You guys know Renee if you're a regular listener of the program. These are the people who support the show. Abigail T, Adam Q, Alan B, Andrew C, Andrew H, Angela, Ari R, Ben, Benji, Bobby M, Brosnan, BZ, Champagne Kami, Chi, Christine H, Colin R, Connor R, Cyber Snowstorm, Dan, Dan K, Dan M, Dank Uger, Dave K, David Z, David P, Dragon Slayer, Eugene B, Frauds K, FTW All Day, Future MD, George A, Greg D, Grim L, Grimlock, I could say, Ian Curtis J, Jameson Test, Janelle A, Jasmine H, Jeff K, Jeremy M, John B, John S, Jonathan B, Jonathan L, Joseph R, Joyce M, Justin S, Katie S, Katz, Kaushal, Lisa D, Lisa H, Mark S, Matt Z, Max W, me, Mitch V, Michael B, Michael J, Michael A, Mr. Dinks, Nicole A, Namde Net, No Style, Odeth Custer, Ryan, Left Is Best, Scott R, Sean H, Stephen S, Struggle Session, Struggle Steven, TM, Tammy G, Thaddeus A, Tina M, Todd K, Tom G, Tom M, Why That Tie Guy, Will P, Wutopian, Zachary P, Zarin, and Zoe G. Folks, give me a second to get a drink, and we will go a little bit more for the patrons and for the people watching live. Otherwise, see you all next time on Doomed. All right. Folks, listen. Let's see what we got here. Let's read some, okay. I see that people are kind of upset that I let her talk for so long. The areas I let her talk is where I felt like I needed to. Janice, our guest, I felt like she needed to explain her position here. And I know what you're going to say. We know her position. We see, I brought it up on the last hour of the show where I believe she is funded, if not, specifically funded in a way, but, used by different groups as the voice here, at least in the U.S. media. And if I didn't hear from her how she was going to discuss her position on why Morales had to go and why Bolivia is in the state it is in, then I felt like I wasn't going to be able to properly do the rest of the show where I can actually hit her on the points I wanted to hit her on. And I have no regret for that at all. Maybe there was one or two moments where I should have cut her off and kept the show moving, but again, I let her have it. I've seen how these debates work. I've seen when Sam and Michael from the Majority Report have these debates. And Sam is usually good on this front, but I've seen Michael cut people off when he felt like they were saying, and there are times when you should cut someone off. And I feel like I did cut her off at those points. Maybe not all of them, but I did cut her off at those points. but Michael and some people who cut people off frequently, I feel like they, while good intention to do it, I feel like they aid the opposition by saying, "Hey, they can't have a conversation here, so they're going to cut you off and not let you get your point across." I mean, if she started spouting out the Christian fundamentalist fascism that I'm seeing, where God is being returned and God is great, and you know the indigenous people are need to go back to their areas of Bolivia, she started saying that shit, I would have dropped it in a minute. I would have hung up on her if she wouldn't let me, if I cut her off and she still was speaking and wouldn't let me end that conversation. But she wasn't doing that, so I wanted to hear her side of this. I mean, this is what this show is. If we don't have this debate, then I don't know how we're gonna get to the part of the debate I wanted to have. Zoe's telling me to look at her meme on Discord. I'm sure it's worthy of me jumping into the Discord. I'm not in Discord right now. Maybe I should have the Discord open for this, but Matt tonight. It's a meme. Okay, I'll pull it so people could see the meme. This is in the Discord, only available to patrons, which you all are if you're listening to the podcast. This is a meme from patron Zoe, using our guest in the meme. Very, very clever, Zoe. Very clever. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna look. I was making faces too. I'm not gonna. It is what it is. It is what it is. Did anyone see any super chats? I want to get to those people first. If there's not, no big deal. I just don't want to keep them. I just don't want to have them missed, being that they paid to have a super chat. Let me go directly to the super chat area. Give me a second here. I see Ian is in the YouTube chat. Ian Goodrum, who Ian, I know you weren't sure about the interview at first. I appreciate you checking it out. I will say that I saw your tweets and your information prior to the interview, and you were one of my resources in terms of making sure that I was hitting all I had many resources. I want to give a shout out to the Gray Zone and to Max Blumenthal and Ben Norden, who I saw he was on the Periscope chat. I used them to look at this. I read their reporting, used other sources to back up their claims, and I think they're great journalists. But again, I didn't want her to have some sort of. I don't want anyone on the opposition to have some sort of out saying, "Oh, you're listening to just Blumenthal and Norden and Goodrum." No, I took their word because I respect them, and then I double checked, and their word was correct. Ian said how she's a little too savvy for that. She's laundering that fundamentalism through faux leftism. I mean, I believe I called her out for what she was. I said at the very least she's, to be nice, a neoliberal, what I think is a neoconservative at the very least. Maybe, I don't know beyond that. I don't know. Let me go back to the... All right, super chat here. Rex Soul, thank you for the super chat. You didn't even say anything. You just dropped a $5. I appreciate the support, really. Bogolemia with the super chat, $20 super chat. Thank you, buddy. I'm setting up. I've got the Elgato Stream Deck to set up, thanks to all your patron support. So I'm gonna have a soundboard so I will give you whatever I decide my version of the majority report shofar is. Bogolemio says, God, she wasn't just a train wreck. She's far more like a high-speed, head-on Hyperloop collision. Anyways, you're doing a great job, Matt. Keep up the excellent work. I appreciate the kind words, Bogolemio. Really. I think she was well spoken, without a doubt. She was not, and I wasn't expecting any less. There's a reason why she's invited to go on BBC and CNN, and I watched her interviews that were on YouTube from those from other media outlets. I listened to a podcast she did. I didn't bring this up because, again, I will bring it up here, but I didn't bring this up to her because, again, I am a proponent of going on every possible show. I don't care if it's on the right, unless you're a fascist podcast. I'm not going to be, if Richard Spencer wants to talk to me, I'm sorry, buddy. I'm not going on your podcast. That's for sure. But I'm a proponent for going on, as many, if Caitlin Bennett, the Kent State Gun Girl, had a podcast and wanted me on, I'd go on there. If Ben Shapiro wanted me on his podcast, I'd go on there. If Turning Point USA, if Charlie Kirk had a podcast and wanted me on, I'd go on there. I wouldn't go on there and talk shit about the Democratic Party and feed into whatever narrative they want. We would go on there and debate about their politics and my politics. But I'm a proponent for that. And I respect anyone, not respect them specifically, but I respect them coming on the show or doing a conversation on, having that conversation, extending that olive branch. I don't want to say an olive branch because that's the wrong way to say it. Just extending that invitation. Because these conversations are important. I think people who report on this stuff will get something out of Janice's answers that even I probably might not have caught on when we're having this conversation. So yeah, that's where I land on this. I mean, I don't really take into account people who don't like that I had her on or whatever. This is what I'll do. And that if I didn't think I was a proper person to handle it, I wouldn't do it. I mean, if I came on and had no idea about what I was getting myself into, I would have been an idiot to go into this. But this is a show that covers the right first and foremost. And I knew about those groups and those organizations, and especially the U.S. groups, or the Western groups, I should say, that were backing this ousting of Morales, this coup. I gotta tell you, and I told her this too, so I'm not saying anything like with her off and behind her back. I want to say it again to really get push forward how this bugged me. The fact that she kept bringing up that Áñez, who has declared herself president of Bolivia, was a woman. Just, ugh! It's like that maple cocaine tweet with liberals saying, we need more, with the clapping, we need more women guards, in prisons. It was so frustrating to hear, and that's when, to me, the facade of her political leanings sort of began to crack in our conversation. Listen, I know a lot of people are bringing up, and I brought it up because I think it's important to bring up, the fact that her great-grandfather rose to power in Bolivia as through a coup. I'm twofold on that. It definitely speaks to who she is and the family she came from. But I mean, it's not the biggest point to me, actually. The biggest point is, who are the current groups with big money backing from the United States and U.S. billionaires and multimillionaires who are funding the groups that are connected to the opposition and people like Janice? That, to me, is the story. You don't need anything else in terms of her. Everything else is just a cherry on top to me. I mean, I feel like we get distracted by this sometimes. I mean, it's so okay, I had a tweet go viral this week. You've probably seen it. I mean, I usually have tweets that get some attention, but this one more so than usual. It was about Michael Hayden from Southern Poverty Law Center's Hate Watch. His wonderful expose reporting. I don't know if expose is the proper word, but reporting on Stephen Miller's leaked emails to Breitbart that really get across that this guy, is a white supremacist. And people will say, "Oh, we knew he was a white supremacist," but no, this is the proof. This is this is the undeniable proof here. This is not, "No, yeah, we knew already because of what he says with code." No, this is as is without the code. This is as straightforward as you're going to get that he's a white supremacist. This is news. And Michael Hayden will come on this show. I've already reached out to him. He couldn't come on this week. And I wanted to do the Bolivia show, so it worked out. And this is, and let's go back to this tweet. So I tweeted that, how Stephen Miller via leaked email says, "I am a white supremacist." And the right says, and I've seen this defense from people like the baseball crank, the right says, "It is impossible to decipher this message. What could it mean? It could mean anything." Because he didn't outright come out and say, "I'm a white supremacist." He just had racist screeds against immigrants and pushed forward policy that we see the Trump administration using to racist policy, I might add, to hurt immigrants. And then I followed up in my tweet with when Dems have a leaked email that says, for example, "Let's order pizza." The right says there's a secret pedo ring being run in the basement of a DC pizza place, and I've decoded what each topping means. I'm clearly referencing Pizzagate there, and how Pizzagate came out of the right using a bunch of leaked Podesta emails. Podesta was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager. A lot to go into there, but the right decided to look at his pizza orders for the campaign, the emails talking about different pizza orders, and say the pizza orders must secretly be code for pedophile rings that are using pizza terminology like different toppings to get across different types of pedophilia terminology so they can't be outed. Now that is insane. Pizzagate is an insanity. It's a conspiracy theory, unfounded. It is ludicrous. The pizza place where they claim, the Pizzagate conspiracy theorists claim children who are being trafficked were held in their basement. They don't even have a basement. DC Comet Pizza DC. It's ludicrous. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because I've received replies to these tweets saying, "Bro, you're getting politics, get into this. The Pizzagate people proved that there was a vast pedophile ring. Just look at Epstein." No, the Pizzagate people don't prove that at all. Are you kidding me? Number one, Jeff Epstein was a noted pedophile before Pizzagate was even a seed planted in these people's minds. Before Hillary Clinton was even running for president in 2016, people knew Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile. He's been a known pedophile for geez. When was he jailed? At least a decade ago. At least. People knew Jeff Epstein was a pedophile. He was in jail. So, no, Pizzagate had nothing to do with that. Number two, conspiracy theorists use real actual things to give backing, to give notability and justification to their conspiracies. Yes, there are pedophile rings in this world that are obviously able to continue running because there are moneyed interests and very powerful people who are pedophiles and use these pedophile rings for their sexual deviancy and their, just literally disgusting rape of these people, underage people or otherwise, who are being trafficked. That is absolutely true. Again, Epstein is proof. But Pizzagate has nothing to do with that. And if anything, focusing on conspiracies is ridiculous to trying to undo these pedophile rings. In fact, if anything, it hurts these conversations. So that's why I'm bringing up this tweet, to why I focus on certain things. I can't, I'm not even saying these other things out there are conspiracy theories. I don't want that to be the analogy. The analogy is I could only speak to the direct things that are out there. And when you really get to the crux of it, the real reasons for people having these positions or for things going on in this world, you don't need the extra stuff. Like if the Pizzagate people really wanted to be of help to stopping pedophilia and human trafficking, they didn't need this whole pizza thing and to tie in Hillary Clinton, and the Clintons, without a doubt, have connections with Epstein. We could get into that, but you don't need to tie in the 2016 election and try to use it as it was some sort of thing to take down Trump. You don't need that. So you focus on what matters here. I'm tired, and I'm hyped up from the conversation. It sort of bothered me too that she was telling me to calm down. I mean, if anyone should be hyped up, it should be her. I mean, look what's happening to Bolivia. I mean, the fact that she was so calm was a little bit, again, telling to me. Jeez, a lot of comments. Renee, you're in the chat. Give me your thoughts. I know you want to call in. We have to do this another time. In one comment, no more than 3 or 4 sentences, tell me, and I'll leave it to the very end so we could have this. You could have the final word here, because as a Chilean who is been very helpful in my coverage of Chile and getting the great guest we had on Montserrat for the last show. I value your opinion on what's going on in South America. So please tell me. Grim says, knowing the CIA has your back makes you feel real secure, I guess. Right. I mean, it also, you don't need to be a Bolivian expert or Bolivian to know that this is how these right-wing co-opting of these movements go. Like, she kept saying how this was a movement created and led by Bolivian people with real gripes against Morales. Now, we could debate that all day. We're never going to get an answer out of there. But that's why I wanted to frame it as, no, let's take a moment and let's just say that's correct. Because there probably is, without a doubt, there's hundreds of thousands of people out there in the streets who wanted Morales to step down. No, less than the people who voted for him in this recent election, that's for sure. But again, there are a significant number of people who wanted Morales to not have a 4th term. And probably people who had these people had no connection to any of the stuff I talked about with Jeanine. Let's take that premise. Those people don't need to be working with these groups for them to be co-opted. And it doesn't attack these people. It doesn't make them dupes. It doesn't make them less than. It doesn't make them stupid. This happens in every single country in the world. It happens in the U.S. Moneyed groups with interests in certain people being in power co-opt grassroots movements all the time. I mean, I brought up Egypt, and I think that's a great example. The Arab Spring there, it's grassroots. This was the people rising up and speaking out there. I mean, and it got co-opted. That's without a doubt. And it doesn't make what they did any less. The great thing about the grassroots movement in Egypt is that they realized, and they continued to work to oust. Well, the second time around was a straight up coup. But I mean, it's not impossible to have a grassroots movement try to dispose of a leader and then there still be a military coup. It's not that hard to believe because it's happened. Ricardo on Facebook says, remember, 2016, the people told him he could not run for president again. What are your thoughts about that? Well, the Supreme Court and Jeanine said that it's different in Peru and they're They're not a lawmaking body. I did not read that, so I can't. Well, I read that they're the equivalent of, the highest court in Bolivia. So I don't know where that information comes from. I can, when it comes to that, I agree to be I'll stand corrected if that's what's necessary. But that is the process that this goes through. And in this country, referendums and laws that are passed by popular vote are overturned by the Supreme Court if they're deemed illegal and not and unconstitutional. It's not that hard to. I mean, that's part of democracy. I mean, let's put it this way: if you wanted the will of the people, we would still have slavery in this country. If you wanted the will of the people, we would still have segregation in this country, in the United States. I mean, you think the majority of people in this country, we're talking the U.S. now, which the majority in this country has meant white, you think in the 50s and the 60s they were on the side of the civil rights movement? I mean, we know the will of the people is not always truly, what's in the best interest of human rights. I mean, the will of the people should be respected as long as it doesn't trample on the rights of others. Renee says she omitted that Adriana, her family, and party were targeted. Plus, lots of condescension towards you and the Bolivian people. Right. I couldn't get into all of it. We went for 2 hours. So, I mean, if... Ian brings up how Jeanine has claimed that China has 80% of Bolivia's debt. I don't think she said that on this show. And if she did, I didn't hear it because I would have said that's not true. But I did mention how China's used as a boogeyman. I mean, it's true. I mean, the idea that Morales striking a deal with China makes him corrupt in any sort of way is ludicrous on its face, being that China is a major world power. I mean, United States works with China. We have a relationship with China, regardless of what Trump says. His portrayal of China as our enemy. He meets with China and he works with them to make sure our economy is not affected negatively through our dealings with China. Ricardo on Facebook says, what are your thoughts on Chavez and Maduro? They are mentors of Morales. Listen, I mean, every leader has its problems. I think that these leaders, much like our own leaders here in the United States, have done horrible things. But at the end of the day, if they were voted by the people, in the way the electoral process works, then they're the legitimate president of their respective country. And if you think there was some sort of fraud, it needs to be proven. And then there are avenues to go through in each country's laws, I'm sure, to remove that president. I mean, we are going through impeachment right now for Donald Trump in the United States. There's a process. There's no one on the left here calling for Donald Trump to be overthrown via military coup. There is no one here on the left saying that. You can think whatever you want about the impeachment process, but that's still the process that we have, and that's what needs to be done. I'm no fan of I think the impeachment that I'm paying attention because it's my job. But I'm not as invested as some who think this is going to be the big change that's going to come and there's going to be some big result out of it. The impeachment process has its issues, but it's the rule of law here, and we should abide by it. Now, if you want to argue that should be a mass revolution of people to overthrow Trump, if that's what a grassroots movement of people do, then has no sort of, and the person who takes power after isn't some sort of, all of a sudden the opposition's taking power, someone who has 0 votes from the people, I mean, then okay. But it's stunning to me that this would be an okay, and again, Janice said it's not okay, so let's go by that. I can't go by anything but what she told me, unless it's disproven, and there's no way I could disprove that she did not want Áñez to be in power, other than the fact that she seems to have some positive things to say about Áñez's presidency, what it means to her as seeing a woman and having someone who is not Morales. Okay, we could, it is what it is. But there's no way this is the outcome that you could think is fair in any way. Say what you will about Morales, people voted for him. If you think he actually lost that election and it was rigged or whatever, millions of people still voted for him. There's no way you're telling me you want to say that he gave himself fake votes to put himself over the top so there was no runoff? You want to argue that? I disagree, but argue that. But there's no way you can argue that millions of people did not vote for him. You have someone who has no votes taking over for someone who had millions of people vote for him. I mean, I don't know where else you go there. Panda Dog on Twitter says, Matt, her whole point on the referendum was dumb. She argues that the vote on the referendum outweighed the Supreme Court ruling because the referendum was the will of the people. Well, if the will of the people still fucking elected Evo any, why wouldn't that count as the will of the people? Yeah, I brought that up, and I even used multiple different analogies there, including the fact that people voted for Evo. But then, of course, her thing is that Evo rigged it, and that the will of the people wasn't enough. The number of people who voted for Morales wasn't enough to not trigger a runoff. That was going to be, and that is what she argued, I believe. But yeah, I mean, you want to argue against for term limits? This is all fine and dandy. This is a whole different conversation. I mean, it's part of this conversation, but just that exclusively. It is part of the conversation, but it's not. But I don't know how else to combat the idea that the referendum does not supersede what the court says by rule of Bolivia's law. Someone on Twitter is adding Chapo Trap House to let them know that I'm platforming a Nazi psychopath. They continued, what the fuck is wrong with you? Daza is a blood-soaked reactionary. I mean, did you not listen to the interview I had with her? I mean, I don't know who else would have gotten the opportunity and taken it to confront her on some of these things. I mean, my one thing I wish I brought up, I had it in my notes, but there wasn't enough time. The weird, bizarre connection that this all has with China. And I tried to bring it up, and we didn't have much time, and there were other things to hit that I felt were slightly more directly involved. But she's gone on numerous times this podcast, I think, called China Uncensored. And again, I'm not advocating she shouldn't go on these podcasts. I'm speaking against what she spoke about when she's on these podcasts. Now, this podcast, let me pull up the information completely so I'm not getting anything wrong here. This podcast, China Unscripted, is backed by Falun Gong, who you guys might know, as a lot of people call this movement a cult movement. It's an anti-Chinese government movement that is extremely pro-Trump. And you might be familiar with them most recently for being outed as the group behind the right-wing propaganda outfit, the Epoch Times, which you'll see online pushing QAnon and pro-Trump propaganda. She's been on this podcast numerous times. Again, not saying she shouldn't go on this podcast, but if I was her, I would take the opportunity to go on this podcast and push against China Unscripted and what they advocate for, and who backs them, and who funds them, and who they support. But that's not what happened. On top of that, the Human Rights Foundation has links to some of the, again, more prominent protesters who are in Hong Kong. I mean, it's not that hard to see what's going on here. Whether these people realize it or whether they're just being co-opted and used without realizing it, you can argue that. I don't know what to tell you there. I don't believe that, but if you believe that, okay. But it's right before your eyes what's going on. I mean, I don't know what else to say. If anyone thinks I platformed her, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, do you just want to reply at her online and call her a fascist and a Nazi? I mean, you think, she's just going to ignore it and continue on. And anyone you do that to is just going to, that's just, I enjoy seeing it and you should do it. I'm not saying don't do it. But if you have the opportunity to call her out to her face and get answers to some of these things, then I don't know why you wouldn't do that. Grim says, Karen Geyer's blog On Belief has a good segment on them. I'm going to reach out to her. She's on my list, actually, for other reasons. I know she runs a podcast about cults. And that clearly is in the wheelhouse of this show. Ian says she's been on the TV show, too. Talking about the Falun Gong-backed media. Listen, that person who said I'm platforming a Nazi psychopath, if you have an ability to get someone who you consider to be a Nazi psychopath in front of you and say, hey, you're supporting these Nazis and I think you're part of this as well, and literally calling these groups that are in power now, that she directly has culpability in getting to power, fascists, I don't know why you wouldn't take it. I'm sorry. Grim says, this was very entertaining and I don't think this quite qualifies as platforming. I'm not going to change those people's minds, but Sam Cedar has libertarians on the show all the time. And he's debated a number of right-wingers. And no one considers what he does platforming because I think he does a similar thing. I mean, that's who I learned this from. I learned from the best. I think Sam Cedar is the best at doing debates against people that he disagrees with via these platforms. I mean, you guys are bringing up Amy Therese. I want to have her on the show too. I mean, why would I not have her on? Platforming to me is when you give someone a platform, obviously, to spread their message. Now, I don't know who would come across this podcast. There's three type of people who are gonna come across this podcast. One, leftists who know who I am, or may not know who I am, but may have heard of me, or maybe recommended this by other leftists, and this might be the first time they hear me, or whatever, who are gonna know what the deal is here. Then there's gonna be people who like her or know her and want to listen to what she has to say. Cool. I'm for that as well. I'm not going to change their minds. But then there's the people who aren't going to quite get what's going on and want to know what's going on. It's not going to be it's not going to be a large audience. Like, I'm not putting her on cable news. I'm not putting her on network television. I'm not putting her on a well-known publication. I'm not putting her on a super popular podcast with millions of listeners. I mean, this show gets a couple, in the tens of thousands of listens on the podcast. And they're going to want to listen. And I think what they hear is going to be someone who has been, who is going to think what you think about her. That she is a psychopath Nazi reactionary. Or who are going to think that maybe she had good intentions, but she's been co-opted. Or they're going to think that she has ties to these groups and willingly or unwillingly, she's pushing the line of U.S.-backed opposition. I mean, I don't see how this conversation went anywhere else. I mean, I literally laid out the right-wing fascist groups that have now taken power because of what happened there. Ryan says, oh, fuck off with this platforming nonsense. It's not like Matt just sat there and asked toothless questions and enabled her. He's not Dave Rubin. Well, thank you, Ryan. Bigolemio says, listen, Falun Gong is a beautiful organization. They have no political aims whatsoever. And I say that as a dedicated 20-year Falun Gong practitioner, so I'm not biased against them. I enjoyed that, Bigolemio. All right, folks. Usually I get through all these comments and we have a full-blown conversation, but it's late. So let's... Renee, did you ever give me your final thoughts on this? Either way. Thank you all for listening. Renee, if you get them in right now, I will read them. But thank you all for listening. I hope most people don't think that I platformed her without actually providing resistance to some of the things. Renee, I'm familiar with John Corbin. I'm going to go into that too. Another show. Grim says, other people worth being on Doomed, not for debate. Mike Prisner, Abby and Robbie Martin, Jamie Peck, Sean KB, and Andy, and Carl Zah. Carl's one of the people whose information I came across to do this show. So yes, I'm aware. And we'll be reaching out. All right. That's the show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. See you all next time on Doomed. Oh, so I'll read this because I like it. Seiko Sweeks. LOL, you didn't platform her. You debunked her nonsense. That's what matters. Thank you. All right, see you all next time on Doomed. Wow, let me continue here. I enjoy these. Big Lemio, you didn't platform her, dude. She got ripped up and it was a great interview. Don't second guess yourself. I just don't want to, you know, I don't want that to be, I don't think I did. But I don't want that to be the case at all. Because it's just not something I would do. Bullwhip says this was a good, informative, and unbiased interview. What she is indecipherable. All right. See you all next time, guys. Take care.